Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Morrisville Town Council business session. It's February the 24th. The time is 6:30, and I appreciate everyone being here on a rather snowy day, so do appreciate everyone being here. I'd like to turn it over to Councilmember Michael Schlink for tonight's invocation. Michael?
Let us pray. O Lord our God, creator and sustainer of all nations and people, we come to you today to thank you for the right to lift up your holy name in this setting. We seek to honor you in thought, word, and deed. Please help us remember America was founded on the greatest idea, the idea that all people are created by God to be free. We thank God today for enabling us to serve the people, put aside our differences, and begin to make a positive difference in the quality of life for countless numbers of other people throughout our town. We ask God to continue to give us the insight, courage, and humility to serve the people and lead with integrity. Also, the sense to be better listeners, to understand, not just respond. In times of difficulty, challenge, and need, grant our leaders and staff the strength to transcend personal interests and seek only after the common good for all. Thank you for the rich traditions of other cultures, our diversity, and the fresh energy that these new way of lives interject into our community. Thank you for the woman on the bus, a man with a dream, and the city on a hill. Thank you for the bravery of the greatest generation and all other sacrifices that have been made on our behalf. Bless our families, especially those battling illness. Bless those so willingly protect and support and all who serve our town. And dear Lord, bless our servicemen and women who courageously defend our freedom each and every day. Amen.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before we adopt tonight's agenda, a couple items. We'll go through the ethics preamble, but also there's a change from the earlier one that was online. We'll talk about that in a minute. But according to the town of Morrisville's our ethics policy, it's the duty of every council member to be not only free of conflicts of interest, but the appearance of conflict of interest. So each meeting I call on the members to see if there's any conflict or appearance on any items on the agenda. Speak now, if that's the case.
No.
Seeing none, I need a not a motion yet. The change to the agenda is there was a transportation quarterly update, which due to the weather and some other circumstances will be delivered at our next meeting. Martha, were there any other significant changes?
The only other change, sir, is we corrected the date of the actual Read Across America Day. It was listed as a different date. It is actually March 2nd. We just corrected that on the agenda.
Okay, so if the motion could include the changes that were just mentioned, that would be great.
I'll make that motion with those changes.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that carries. We have an agenda. There are two sets of minutes to approve tonight. The first one is the January 13th agenda. Stephanie, are there any changes or updates to those? No?
If good, it needs to be approved. For the January 13th minutes, there were no recommended changes.
Okay. Any comments from council? Okay, all those in favor, I'm sorry, let's have a motion first.
I'll make a motion to approve the January 13, 2015 minutes.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries 7-0. The next set of minutes on the 27th. A couple changes. If you look at your screens, you can see those. It looks like some typo-type errors. Any other changes, Stephanie, that are noted? Or is that the extent of them? Is that the extent of the changes of what is in front of us? Okay. All right. Any other comments from the council? Okay. If none, could I have a motion to adopt these minutes?
Move that we
changes.
Move that we adopt the January 27th minutes as amended.
All right.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. That also carries. So we do have two sets of minutes. Thank you very much. The retreat minutes are also in progress right now, so we'll probably see those in the next meeting or two. We have two presentations this evening. The first one is the Read Across America Day proclamation. And as soon as I get it in front of me, here it is, sorry. Council will read their parts. I'm assuming everyone's got their orders here.
I think it's going to do that too.
Excuse me.
That one too?
I think he'll do that.
Okay, excellent. Okay. This is a proclaiming Read Across America Day, March 2nd, 2015. Whereas the town of Morrisville has countless families who value reading and continuing education, and whereas March 2nd, 2015 is the birthday of Theodore Geisel, a.k.a. Dr. Seuss, is recognized as Read Across America Day, and whereas the Morrisville Town Council would like to encourage everyone to read as much as possible and would like to share the following poem.
In honor of National Reading Day, old Mr. Morris asked, "What do we need to make a good living, to thrive, to succeed?"
Here in our new town with bits and e-bytes, crisscrossed by trains and overhead flights.
We need lots of data and fiber to send it, and light-driven optics in order to bend it.
Into our homes and onto our screens, and when it arrives, to learn what it means.
We read it, my friends, for our comprehension, unlocking new worlds too wondrous to mention.
So pick up a book, a tablet, or a phone. Transport your whole family to a magical zone.
Where words convey vision, sharp tastes and bright sounds, and new thoughts and creative ideas, all abound.
Now, therefore, I, Mayor Mark Stolman, on behalf of the Morrisville Town Council, declare March 2nd, 2015 as Read Across America Day in Morrisville, and thank those who participate in this event. This will be adopted the 24th day of February, 2015. And a special thanks to Councilmember Cawley for developing this proclamation. Thank you. Okay. Next up, we're going to hear from Mr. Ted Cole. He's with Davenport and Company. He's going to give us a financial analysis update presentation. I believe we all should have this in front of us. And I do want to thank Mr. Cole for getting here in spite of the weather. I know that you've got obligations locally and
not too far away to Morrisville.
Yeah, so I'm glad
not a problem.
Glad that worked out, and
Yes.
appreciate you being here tonight. So turn it over to you. And
Okay. Great, thank you. I appreciate being here. I think you have hard copies or copies on the screen as well. Davenport has served as financial advisor for the town for a number of years and have assisted on capital planning, bond transactions, things of that nature. What we're going to share with you this evening is an update of a long-term capital plan that addresses specifically the authorized general obligation bonds that you all have outstanding, and begin to put some structure to when you might issue those bonds and how that will come online to your debt profile, the implications on budget and things of that nature, so we can start that process and you all can have some good information to make some decisions as you move forward. I would very much like to keep it conversational, so if there are questions or things that you'd like clarification on, please stop me. I'd be happy to dig in a little bit. There are page numbers in the lower right corner, which is I will reference from time to time. Just so you know, in the back of the book, we have detailed debt schedules for all of your existing debt. If there's a question about existing debt, we can look at that. And we've also included the most recent rating agency reports from both Moody's and Standard & Poor's that date back to 2013, which was the last time that they formally rated the town. Some of you may recall that process, and it was a great process in that you received 2 rating upgrades during that time. Moody's upgraded the town from what was a AA2 to a AA1, so you're one notch away from the highest rating AAA by Moody's. And at the same time, S&P upgraded the town's rating to the AAA level, which is the highest rating that they will assign. So those are in the back. They're full reports if there's a desire to read those or reference back to those. Pretty simply on page... Yes.
I do have one quick question.
Sure.
So the subject tonight will be, is it primarily the 2012 bond that was approved and how that will be actually
issued and how it comes online.
Yeah.
We are going to start with just giving you a brief overview on where you stand today about debt, specifically about debt and your capital plan. We're going to show how you compare to some peers across the country and across North Carolina, so you can understand on some key debt ratios how you compare, and also where you have debt policies. We will give you some perspective on your compliance with those policies. And I'm actually kind of talking off of page 2 here in the goals and objectives. So to your point or your question, we'll start with where you are today, give you a sense of that, and then we will address 2 primary concepts, the first being debt capacity, your ability to take on additional debt within certain ratios or within your policies, and then we'll also address the debt affordability, that is, how do you pay for it? So they're related but different, debt capacity, debt affordability. As I said, along the way, we'll make sure you understand how some of your key debt ratios stand, how you compare, and how you stack up against your policies. And then finally, we'll end with, if you issue these new GO bonds under some assumptions that we've made with staff, this is some things that you might need to do as it relates to budget. Okay? As I mentioned a moment ago on page 3, you are currently rated AA1 by Moody's, AAA by S&P. They were last wrote a report on the town in the summer of 2013. We subscribe to a database that is kept by Moody's. So when we start talking about peer comparatives, we're dealing with Moody's data, but it's a very good proxy for S&P. And we're going to compare you just very generically to cities and towns across the country that are rated AAA by Moody's. There's 179 of those. 1,500 different towns and cities that are rated AA, and 700 and some that are rated single A. And then within North Carolina, 8 AAA towns and or cities, 31 AA's, and 11 single A's. Again, that's all rated by Moody's. Obviously, there are a lot of localities within North Carolina that don't have a rating, have never needed a rating. This is the universe of those rated by Moody's. Yes, sir.
All right, what does credits mean? You just mean towns?
Yes, exactly. I'm sorry. So, town of Morrisville, town of Garner. So their nomenclature is these are different credits.
Okay.
Okay. The takeaway here from page 4 and what we talk about is something called credit spread. So in any given day within the municipal bond market, a AAA borrower is going to get the best interest rate, the lowest interest rate. And all other borrowers, those that are rated below AAA, are sort of priced off of that AAA index. And the takeaway is probably best seen in the chart at the upper right, and that is prior to 2008, investors did very little to differentiate between one borrower and the next municipal borrower, did very little to assign risk between AAA, AA, and single A credits or issuers. Post 08, paying a lot more attention to that. The higher the rating, certainly there's a direct correlation to lower interest rates, which equates to greater debt capacity and greater debt affordability. So now more so than ever, your ratings are very important. They're very relevant to your debt capacity. You all are starting in an excellent spot, obviously, being almost AAA from both Moody's and S&P. So moving forward, the important thing is, one, to identify and understand maybe how you can improve on that Moody's rating, and 2, maintaining that S&P AAA. So, talking about your existing debt today on page 6, you can see it graphically by fiscal year on the left. Below the chart, you'll see that you have about $13 million of tax-supported debt outstanding. A little over $10 million of that is in the form of general obligation bonds, and about $3 million in what we call installment purchase contracts, bank loans, things that are secured by an asset. So almost $13.5 million outstanding. This does include the most recent installment you did for some communications equipment. This does not include the bonds that were voted on and approved that have not been issued. So this is not forward-looking at this point. On the left, upper left, you can see graphically what your annual debt service is, principal versus interest. You can see how it steps down over time. And then on the right-hand side, you can see by fiscal year your actual principal payment, interest, and total. And then on the far right of that table, you'll see something called a 10-year payout, and this is the first debt ratio that I'll speak to. What that's measuring is on a forward-looking basis, 10 years forward, how much of that $13.3 million of principal will be retired. So it's a measurement of how quickly you're amortizing your debt. Absent any new debt, as you look forward 10 years, 74% of that principal will be retired. Higher is generally better. It's a function of not backloading your debt, not putting it off. If you turn the page, you get a little more perspective on that on page 7. We've graphed it a little bit differently on the left. You do have a policy that says you'll maintain at least a 55% payout ratio. So at a minimum, 55% of your debt will be retired in a forward-looking 10-year period. The rating agencies look at this. It's an important ratio. That's why you have a policy. They do not look at it on a bond issue by bond issue basis. They look at it in the aggregate, and that's what we've done here. So in the upper right, what you'll see is the first comparative. So we're comparing you using that Moody's data on the 10-year payout ratio. And so you're at the top in gold. Again, that's about 74%. And then the lighter green bars represent those national cities and towns, AAA, AA, and single A. These are the median measurements for each of those. So if in any of those bars, half of that grouping will be higher than the bar and half will be lower. And then at the very bottom, the dark green are the North Carolina AAA, AA, and single A. So you can see you compare quite well. You're sort of right on top of the medians for this. A little bit of perspective in the lower right. Moody's certainly looks at it. They take it into consideration. They really don't assign a number as to where they give you credit or discredit. S&P gets a little more specific, talking about ideally at 65% or better, you can get a positive adjustment to their rating scorecard. I should note both Moody's and S&P have revamped their local government credit rating process within the last 12 or 18 months. They've tried to put a little more transparency into the process. It's a little bit more quantitative, a lot of ratios, a lot of calculations that they do in their worksheets. But there is still absolutely a qualitative factors that they take into consideration. And rating analysts actually do have the ability to adjust the score from their quantitative analysis based on some qualitative factors. So it's not all math, it's not all ratio driven. Yes, sir.
I just want to clarify for S&P, the payout ratio, the actual ratio that's done or the policy is what
the actual ratio.
Okay, so.
Yeah, right. And I should point out that debt is just one factor within the rating process, obviously. Economy is a big part of both Moody's and S&P's rating criteria. Finance, financial measures, budget measures, management measures. So as you move forward and you look at how you compare to these medians, and specifically maybe how you compare to the AAA medians, don't get too concerned if there are some where maybe you fall a little short, because there isn't any one ratio that will drive the rating. You may be a little short in some areas, but stronger in others. So what we're talking about today is just debt. We really have not addressed in this presentation economic factors, wealth factors, demographics. So back in 2013, when both Moody's and S&P took those rating actions, they obviously did that holistic approach. Today, we're just looking at debt. So I say that because I don't want anybody to get alarmed, if you will, that, hey, we look like we're a little bit low on this ratio. Is that going to jeopardize our rating? That's definitely not the message I want to send. It's just one data point amongst many that they will look at.
If you pay out more, if you beat that 10-year payout, does that improve your?
For S&P, they actually do give you, and you'll see the slide in a moment, they do give you a lower score, which in their methodology is better if you can be at 65% or above. That is part of their methodology. Moody's only really takes it into account if it's unusually slow or rapid, is their wording. So they don't assign a specific number to it. So a few more ratios. On page 8 is debt per capita. So we're taking that $13.3 million of debt outstanding on a population base based on, I want to make sure I get this right, based on the audit number that we're using, 20,753. We do have some growth built into that. We've talked a little bit about these growth assumptions with staff. Again, those can be addressed and modified going forward. But on a debt per capita basis, you're a little over $600 per person. Again, that's on the $13.3 million of debt, 20,750 population with some growth. That debt per capita ratio is going down over time because you're paying down your debt, but also because we are assuming some growth in the population base. On the upper right, you compare quite well to the AAA, all the national credits, but certainly within North Carolina compare favorably to the AAAs. A little bit higher than the median for the AAs, but certainly not an outlier. Page 9 is debt to assessed value. So we're measuring the amount of debt outstanding, the $13.3 million as a percent of your tax base, which is right at about $3.7 billion. So $13.3 million of principal as a percent of 3.7 billion. You're about 0.36%. You do have a policy that says you will not exceed 2%. Believe it or not, that is a relevant policy at 2%. It is an upper limit for you all. It's well above where you are today, but on a national perspective, 2% is not a terribly high number. So 2% policy is a meaningful policy. As I said a moment ago, you're well below it. And if you look just at this ratio, or you look at your comparative in the upper right, you compare favorably, you would take away from this slide that there is certainly debt capacity within this measure, within this policy, for you all to consider taking on the additional 20 or so million of authorized GOs that you have out here. So that is that first concept. There is, within this ratio, certainly debt capacity. As I said, in the upper right, you compare favorably, lower is better. And then within Moody's, on the bottom right, you fall within what they consider the very strong category here, under 0.75%.
Will you be, I don't want to cheat and look ahead here, but are you going to then lay the 2012 over this to see how it changes these numbers?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Absolutely. Page 10, debt service versus expenditure. So what we're measuring here is your annual debt service payment, principal and interest, which is in the current fiscal year 15, it's $1.7 million. That's what you're paying in the fiscal year for this tax-supported debt. As a percent of your governmental revenues, you're just a little bit over 8%. You have a policy that says you won't exceed 15%. Again, that's a good policy. That's a good number as an upper limit. And on the comparative basis, you can see, you compare, you're right on top of the national AAA median and a fair amount below the North Carolina AAA median, which looks to be out around 13%. And for S&P in the lower right, you fall in their strong category, just in the strong category at 8.28%. Your debt service is stepping down nicely in fiscal 16. It goes down by give or take $300,000. You can kind of see that in the graph. You fall below 8% in fiscal 16. So technically, that would throw you into that very strong category for S&P once you sort of turn the page into the new fiscal year.
That's not going to last very long.
Some plans.
Over time.
Yeah. Don't even think about that.
Page 11 is it's measuring debt as a percent of your governmental revenues. But in this case, we're measuring the principal amount of debt outstanding. That's the $13.3 million as a percent of governmental revenues of about $27.8 million. The math works out you're at about 47%. It's declining over time. On a comparative basis in the upper right, that all looks just fine. You compare favorably. Lower is better. And then for both Moody's and S&P, they both have different breakpoints. So for Moody's, you would fall in that AA category. And for S&P, you would fall in what they call the strong category. Okay? You maybe seeing sort of a theme here. On all of these ratios, and particularly those where you have policy, you're in compliance, you compare favorably. The general takeaway from this first section is you've managed your debt in a conservative fashion, you've set it up in a very prudent way, and you absolutely have the debt capacity to be thinking about doing this next phase of capital improvements. And then sort of part two to that is we'll measure the debt affordability.
Question.
Yes, sir.
So this ratio is one that we don't appear to have a specific policy for.
Thank you for mentioning that. We do not. You do not have a policy. It's a relatively. I'm not going to say it's a new ratio, but it has gotten an increased level of interest from the rating agencies within the last, as I said, 12 to 18 months, as they have been looking to revamp their process. So going forward, this may well be a ratio where you'd like to give some thought to a policy, amending your policies to add something. And to the mayor's point, I think as part of that, what's important is, yes, where are you today, but where are you likely to go with this new debt? How will the new debt impact this ratio? You want to make sure if there is a policy that's put in place that we strike that balance between setting it at a level that's relevant, but also setting it at a level that's going to allow you all to do what you've identified as wanting to do. And then within those two, at the bottom right, sort of within those breakpoints, it's interesting when you look at Moody's, for example, they have a very tight window for their AAA and AA credits. You've got to be, under 33%, which, as we've been doing this over the last year, I can probably count on one hand the number of localities that have been able to demonstrate that they're under 33%. And still a very few number that can demonstrate that they're within 67%. And then you fall into a very wide category with Moody's, anywhere between 67 and 300%, which is where most people fall out. Mm-hmm. S&P has got a little tighter range. And so as you're thinking about a policy, it may be the kind of thing where you think about setting it, one, at a level that's going to allow you to do some things as you move forward with your GOs, but maybe tied a little bit more directly to these S&P breakpoints.
Would it help at all for our interest rate to adopt a policy soon, or does that really matter?
No, I don't think it will. It would manifest itself in your discussions with the rating agencies that, hey, we've been watching what's going on with your new rating methodology, so sort of speaking to the analyst, right. And we've decided we'd like to amend our policies to try to reflect how you've been evolving, and so it would be helpful in that discussion, but it's not going to be a driver to where the rating result ends up.
Gotcha.
12 is the last rating ratio I'll look at. This is specific to Standard & Poor's, and if you look at that upper left chart, you've got two axes. The The vertical axis is measuring debt as a percent of governmental revenues. And remember, you were about 47%. So you fall in the 30 to 60 range for that. And then the vertical axis on the left is measuring debt service as a percent of expenditures, and y'all were about a little over 8%. So you meet at the green box, which is a 3. You follow that? You come down and you go over and you meet at the 3. And if you look in the lower right, you'll see that a 3 for S&P is considered adequate. Now, below that matrix on the left is where they can apply some qualitative adjustments. And on the left-hand side, we've put 2 negative 1s in a circle. Those are positive. They're good adjustments. They're negative, but they're good. Lower is better, sort of like golf. A score is lower is better. And you would get 2 positive adjustments. One, because your debt to assessed value is below 3%. Remember, it was like 0.3%. And you'd get another positive adjustment because your 10-year payout ratio is greater than 65. So for Standard & Poor's, and we've tried to show you this in the upper right, you start at a 3 based on the pure quantitative approach, and then you get 2 qualitative adjustments, and you end up at a 1, which is considered very strong. Now, under that matrix on the right, there are a whole list of things that could be qualitative adjustments against you. And you'll see significant medium-term debt plans producing a higher initial score when included. At this point, I don't think what you're doing or what you're talking about doing with these new GOs would rise to that level. But that's certainly an area where they could, and this is the qualitative adjustment. This is where the analyst has some discretion. You know, they could look at the new GOs that are coming online and decide to apply a qualitative adjustment there. The other areas where you could get an adjustment, really none of those would apply based on anything that we've seen. So that's, again, a unique approach specific to Standard & Poor's that measures what they call debt and contingent liabilities.
So you said none of the negative impacts apply to Morrisville?
I don't think so. The only one that would be a potential is in your discussions with a rating analyst, and they're talking about doing the additional GOs. You know, that may rise to the level of what they call significant medium-term debt, but I really don't think it would, given what we're about to go into and demonstrate for y'all.
Okay.
Page 13. Sorry about the small type, but it'll make some sense. And there's a few other pages just like this that, if we spend a little bit of time with this one, the others will go smoothly. From left to right, we're looking at everything here on a fiscal year basis, beginning with the current fiscal year 15. And under column B, we have your existing tax-supported debt service. That's principal and interest every year. We know what that is to the penny. That's only going to change if you choose to refinance debt. Columns C, D, and E are placeholders. That's where we are ultimately going to lay in the new debt that you might issue. We haven't done it yet. We want to start with just the existing debt. Column F would be a sum total of B through E. And right now it's just equal to B, column B. The middle of the page is where we've identified, working with staff, sources of funding for that debt service. And I'm going to start with actually column I, which is the 2 pennies that you all implemented as part of your FY14 budget, anticipating the new bonds that would be issued. 2 pennies in the coming fiscal year. The budget you're about to go into, 16, generates about $760,000. And we've assumed, based on growth in your tax base, that each penny will generate additional revenues every year. We're growing the value of the penny at 2% a year. That's why 760 goes to 775, goes to 790, on down the line. Now, y'all implemented those 2 pennies in 14, and as I understand it, in fiscal year 14 and 15, the year we're in now, the 2 pennies were set aside and utilized to help get things started on some planning and engineering. I think that is the basic description of where that's been. That's why we are not showing these 2 pennies until fiscal 16, the year you're going into. And then I'll address column G. Column G is the dollar amount, obviously, is $1,611,000. That is the amount of money that you're spending in the current budget, fiscal 15, for debt service. So it's your current year appropriation for debt service. Okay. Now you can see your actual debt service in 15 under column B is $1,007,000. You're appropriating from current year revenues $1,006,000. That's why over under column M, as in Mike, we're showing about $105,000 of fund balance that was used to sort of bridge the gap there. The main takeaway here on page 13 is that column G does not change. It's flat at $1,611,000 every year. Remember, that's what's part of your FY15 budget, and we're assuming on this page that even though your existing debt steps down every year, we know that, right? We know that from column B, it's stepping down. We're assuming here that you don't budget those declines, that you hold flat going forward. That's that bullet point. FY15 debt service appropriation held constant into future years. The idea being that if you keep funding a debt budget at $1,611,000, even though your actual debt service is stepping down, you're going to start to have some dollars available for the next bond issue that's coming. That's one approach. That's why we've called it option 1. And if you were to do that, you'll see under column K that every year, 16 and beyond, you've got extra dollars. So we're comparing, when we look at column K, we're comparing F and J. F is what you owe, J are the dollars available. Therefore, with the exception of 15, which there was a slight use of reserves, 16 and beyond, you've got extra dollars before you do anything. Because again, your current year budget plus the 2 pennies that you raised in 14, and we haven't done any new debt yet. Okay? Mm-hmm. As a comparison, on page 14, the only thing we've changed is column G. And what we've said is, rather than holding that budget flat at the 15 level, you allow that debt service budget to reduce every year, commensurate with the reduction in your existing debt. So essentially, those dollars are freed up to be used elsewhere, wherever that may be in your budget. So we're just not holding that $1,006,000 constant every year. As a result, column K, although still positive, doesn't have quite the level of surpluses that the prior page had. And I think that gets to just a basic question or discussion, not necessarily for tonight, but moving forward, about how you budget. Do you budget those declines in your existing debt every year, or do you want to consider holding that debt service budget constant, which will sort of naturally build in some affordability for this next phase of financing?
So on page, I'm a little confused. On page 13, it's $1.6 million every year constant that you're paying to pay the debt down. And then we're allocating the budget. And then on this page, explain to me again why it's going down.
It's going down commensurate with column B.
Okay.
See that they become exactly the same. So as the debt steps down, so too does that budget.
The payment goes down. Okay.
Yep. So you're just sort of you're putting back into the overall budget that decline in your debt. That's what's happening on 14. Okay.
Question on that.
Yes.
It sounds like how you described this could almost be a policy.
It certainly could. I think it could be something that maybe
that we could put in for future.
Yeah, and if I can make a couple comments. If you look at page 13, there's really two reasons why we've shown you this. One is it's comparable to how these presentations have been made to council before. The debt affordability analysis as presented to you has assumed a established base rate of debt service over the years that are being evaluated as we look forward into the future. So in order to show you apples and apples to comparisons, that's the first reason. Also at the retreat, we did at least broach the topic of what would happen if we established a debt service policy where we did establish a funding amount and then allow it to accumulate into a reserve account. So that's what that one illustrates. Page 14 is actually much more similar to the way Morrisville does currently budget for debt, is when we're putting together the budget, we're programming what we need to pay only, and everything else is then available for operations funding. So that's why you're seeing two examples.
And again, don't get too excited about any of these, because we still have 2012. Right?
Just wait.
Yes. Hold on.
Perfect segue.
Yeah.
To page 16, where we have laid out the basic assumptions about the authorized 2012 bonds: $5.7 million for Parks and Rec, $14.3 for streets. Preliminary, working with staff, identified the following plan. Street bonds issue in the fall of 15, so September of 2015, the entire $14.3 million, and then come back in July of 16 and issue the authorization for Parks and Rec. So that's our starting point. Obviously, as you evolve and you want to consider other options, if you want to consider other options, that's doable, but this is what we've started with for tonight's presentation. Page 17, couple things, and I'll start on the right because I think it'll sort of help understand the timing. Our basic assumptions. We are amortizing this new debt, $20 million, under what's called level principal. And what that means is every year you make the same amount of principal payback. As a result, anytime you issue debt under a level principal structure, your first year is the highest year of debt service, and then it declines because your interest is greatest the first year, and then the interest component steps down. So it's not like your typical mortgage where your total payment every year is flat. Level principal means declining debt. It is the starting point for what the local government commission would like to see. You do have flexibility. If there is a different way you'd like to structure those payments, let's say you still keep it within a 20-year term, but you can do something other than level principal if there's a reason to do that, and there's allowances for that within the law. But for a starting point, we started with level principal, and certainly want to see if it's doable to do it that way, because that would be the preferred option. 20-year financing at 5%. I will tell you 5% today is probably a solid 1.5% higher than the market. Market's been fairly volatile. If indeed you issue bonds in the fall of 15, I think it's very likely you're going to do better than 5%, even in 16. But just to be conservative, we've done a planning rate of 5%. So the September of 15, which is fiscal 16, we've shown that first piece coming on $14.3 million. You probably have an interest payment in fiscal 16, principal payment the following fiscal 17, pretty standard amortization and payment structure. And then we do the Parks and Rec bonds, would technically be issued in July of 16, which is fiscal 17. You would have an interest payment in 17, principal starts in 18, $20 million in total, and with the structure we've shown, 20 years level principal at 5%, your total payback, principal and interest would be $31 million. So if you take those basic assumptions, we then circle back on page 18 to give you a look at how you compare under those key ratios. So your 10-year payout ratio takes a step down. You're at about 60%, still above your policy. It starts to go back up. Your debt to assessed value steps up, obviously, still below 1% in all of those years, which will compare favorably today even, and you're well below your policy. Debt service to expenditures gets a little bit higher, up around 14%, but still below your policy. And the debt to governmental revenues peaks out at just above 100% and then comes back down. So this gives you a sense of sort of, can we do what we're proposing to do and still be able to demonstrate compliance with our policies, still compare favorably to the peer groups? I think the answer on all of those is yes. And maybe gives you in that lower right a little bit of an idea about if you want to consider a policy for that ratio. You got to think about setting it somewhere at that 120 range or above, just so that you can have the capacity to take these debt obligations on in the next few years. So I really don't see any issue with these debt ratios and the proposed debt.
Can I ask a quick question? I should have asked this before we started. The issuance of the bonds in September 2015, are we still on target for that? I mean, I know we have to have an assumption here.
Yeah, and we've left the same assumptions in place as when council considered this originally. We are bringing you back a McCrimmon Parkway extension update that some of those things could be explored further by council.
Okay. So affordability, page 19 under option 1. Remember, option 1 under column G is where we hold that flat at $1.6 million. Don't budget those declines. The takeaway, you'll see under column C that we've laid in now the new debt service for those two different bond issues. We blended them into a single column. That's the $31 million total payback over the life. You can see that at the bottom of column C. And what we've identified is, in addition to the 2 pennies that you raised in 14, you need approximately 2 additional pennies, and we're showing those 2 pennies coming online in fiscal 16. That is column L. Those are where the 2 new pennies would begin to hit your budget, $760,000 that first year. And so prior to those 2 pennies, you'll see that column K now goes negative, right? Remember on those prior slides, column K was positive. You had extra dollars flowing through. Now we've added new debt under column C. Column K goes negative, and what we've solved for is 2 pennies in fiscal 16 that would be able to be used to pay for the new debt service.
Are those 2 pennies for the parks bond, or are we talking about, okay.
That's kind of how we've described them over the years, but
Okay.
the reality is it's obviously not an even split between the 2 bond issuance. So
Yeah, I think you could
kind of how we're describing it, but the reality is one was about 10 million, the other was about 10 million.
But in the previous, you were showing the 2 cent, we did it in 14.
Yes, that was the first 2 pennies, and I'm not sure that it was specifically tied to one or the other questions. But in total, what we're showing is 4 pennies, and I think you could, if you cared to, you could allocate those 4 pennies against parks versus the other question if there were a need or a desire to do that. The street bonds are about 3 times the size of the park, so it's 3 pennies versus 1 penny, give or take. So that is, and what you'll see, I think there's a lot of moving parts to this page 19, but remember, column K is where we're measuring F versus J. So F is your total debt service payment, including the new debt. J are the resources available that only include your budget for debt service plus the 2 pennies from 14. And that's why column K here goes negative. And that's where we start laying in the equivalent of 2 more pennies under column L that begins in fiscal 16. And so you end up with sort of an adjusted cash flow under column N. You actually put a few pennies, you put some dollars away in fiscal 16. You put about $1.3 million. You have about $1.3 million extra of cash flow, but then you're going to see that you start to use some of that in fiscal 18 and 19. So we're sort of evolving this to just in terms of practice and implementation with the budget. You're going to have to keep track of some of those dollars. I think it's a very doable process, but just like you did, you kept track of the 2 pennies from fiscal 14. You'll need to keep track of the 2 pennies from 16. And if you have a few extra dollars in one year that you need in a future year, you're going to need to account for that in the budget.
One last question, I'm sorry. Why does the CIP debt service go up from 357 to 1.5?
That's because on that first bond issue, you only have an interest payment in the first year, and then you start principal and interest.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
And then we're bringing on the second bond issue because we did one in September of 15, one in July of 16. So they're both fully on, and you kind of hit your peak in fiscal 18.
Okay, because you're paying principal and interest.
Correct.
On both.
That's right. Exactly right. So 16, you've got interest only on the first one. In 17, you've got full principal and interest on the first bond and only one interest on the second bond. And then, as you noted, in 18, you've got full P&I on both.
Both, okay.
I will just one thing I think that's helpful to you. If you look under column N, as in Nancy, that's sort of the resulting net cash flows, including the additional 2 pennies in 16. As I said, you have some extra dollars in fiscal 16 and 17. That's the $1.3 million and the 160. You're then using some of those dollars to help balance things in 18 and 19. Beginning in fiscal 20, you go positive again. That's the 52,000, the 299,000, the 618. That's where you start to have some additional capacity to either potentially reduce the tax rate or some extra dollars to put back in the budget for whatever purpose you might need to. So you've got 2 pennies in 14, another 2 pennies in 16, but not too far out in fiscal 20 and beyond, you'll be back, all things being equal, to being able to juggle some of those dollars around again, whether it's to pull them into the operating budget or to do something with them within the capital budget. And then we just circle back on page 20 to that option 2. It's exactly the same except column G. Option 2, if you remember, is where we don't hold column G constant. We budget it as your existing debt steps down. We reduce the funding in column G. The upshot is much the same. It's still, we're showing another 2 pennies in fiscal 16, the budget that you're going into. The one thing you'll notice compared to the prior page is column M, you're using those one-time extra dollars from the first year for a number of years. And column N, as in Nancy, doesn't go positive again until about 2023. And that makes sense because you have a few less dollars flowing through this model than the prior model. And as a result, it's going to take you a few more years with the same 2 pennies before you go positive again. Remember, the only difference here is that column G. So column G on page 20, there's fewer dollars available in this page than there were in the prior page. Therefore, even though we're still only showing another 2 pennies, you can see that in column N, when you compare those pages, it takes you a little longer to go to the positive on this option. And that basically means, but it'll be a few extra years before you have some latitude on what to do with those 2 pennies, how to maybe roll some of it back into your budget and or take on additional projects. That's all we prepared. I know it's a lot. Happy to address questions. Going forward, I know you've got some decisions to make. There's schedules that are being assessed, and for y'all's benefit, for staff, as you think through this, if there are alternative cases you'd like to consider, that's what we're here to do until you get ready to actually do the actual transaction.
I'll go last. let other folks speak up. Go ahead.
I just ask a quick question, because you started off by, clearly you have to use assumptions here, and the assumption of the 5% for the interest rate. So if we already know we're going to get a much better rate than 5%, then we're looking at these figures clearly being a little more positive and a little sooner, hopefully.
Yeah, I feel comfortable in telling you that this this really is sort of worst case from an interest rate perspective. I mean, certainly something could happen that would spike interest rates higher, but I think that's unlikely in everything we're seeing. So you've got some real upside on the interest rate. Now, how big of an impact will that be? Does that mean you can get by with 1 penny? No, but it will give you a little more flexibility.
Well, I'm thinking more about the out years, the 2020 versus the 2023. I mean, the 2020, that might end up being 2018.
Yes, that's a great point. You could see that go positive
Sooner.
a year earlier or 2, perhaps.
Yeah.
So in the beginning of the presentation, you said we had 13 million of outstanding debt. So
Today.
Yeah, today. Is that including everything that we just mentioned with the 2 bonds, or is it, what is the total? What I want to know is, and I'm sorry if I'm asking.
That's okay.
I'm not a financial expert, but what is the total outstanding debt?
31.
31, okay. 31.
No matter what.
That's the new debt.
Right now, what you've got outstanding is 13 million worth of debt.
Yes.
And remember, you're paying some of that down every year.
Yeah.
Under our assumptions, by July of 16, you'll have another $20 million of debt on it. So
Okay.
it's 33 million, but between now and July of 16, you'll pay a little down.
Yep.
So we'll call it 30 million. Somebody beat me.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure. Okay. That 31 million. All right. Got it.
And that's the principal amount, not including the interest.
Correct.
Yeah, the debt service is 31, either option.
Debt service is about 47.
It's almost double.
31 on just the new bonds.
Right.
Existing is,
That's why I asked the question.
16.
It'll be
yeah, you've got to be mindful of the
Almost.
difference between
So 30
principal and total debt service.
Okay.
Today, you've got 13 million of principal, and if you pay it out between now and its final maturity, you'll pay back 16.3 million of principal and interest.
So 31 million. Standing debt.
down on this end. Michael, do you have?
Yeah, sorry.
In the big picture then, just, I'm wondering, because the estimated incremental taxing equivalent, okay, so we had a debate at the time whether, what if we would have added 1 more penny to that? In your opinion, do you think, I mean, looking at these figures, it seems like that would have been a good thing?
From my perspective, it would be a good thing because you would have had 3 pennies in the hopper at this point, and that perhaps could have taken care of it. It would have been close.
And then, how does all that going to factor back into where our bond rating is going to come? What do you think our bond, after looking at all these figures, do you think will still be held high?
I don't see any issue with this plan of finance impacting your bond rating negatively. Probably the most in
21.
Pardon?
In 2021, you don't think it will? Okay.
No, but remember that there are lots of other things that they'll be taking into consideration, how you're doing within the economy, how you're doing in your operating budget. But if you issue bonds in September, we'll need to have rating agency interactions in, let's call it August. The most important thing I think that can be discussed at that meeting is that we have a plan for how we're going to repay this new debt we're about to issue. And so that gets to your budget that you're going into and what steps you might take to put the additional dollars you need in place. I think that'll be probably your most important discussion, that you can demonstrate that there's a plan to repay the new debt.
Thank you. That was it.
Vicki, you have any?
Maybe I can just restate something you already said to make sure it sticks. For option 1, if we keep the same debt service payment, the 1.6, throughout the life of this service, we are going to be in a stronger financial position at the end of this 2038 to do new projects, because we'll have more money at the end to do future things. Versus if you pay as you go or pay down a little bit each year, there might be some more rearrangement of the debt service.
That's right. I think it's you're dedicating a little more to that capital program every year than you would under option 2, which really gives you flexibility and options. And one of those options may be that you can do some additional projects a little sooner than you would otherwise.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, DJ?
I'm good. This has been very useful. Thank you.
All right. Good. So, Chris, go ahead.
Assume for tonight's purposes that these are the only 2 options we have. I know there are others. At what point would we do we get to? I assume we do get to choose between the 2 options. When would we need to do that?
It's 100% in y'all's court in terms of choosing it, no question. I would think it's going to be part of the only difference in the options is column G, and that gets to how you choose to budget for 16. Because remember, if you look under column B, your debt service on just the existing bonds you have goes down by almost $300,000. And so in fiscal 16 budget that you're embarking on, that will be the key question is, do you reduce your budget for debt or do you hold it constant? So I think the timing of it is commensurate with your budget process.
I'm with you.
Go ahead.
That turned out to be a really bad question.
No, that's a good question. And the difference, or going either with option 1, option 2, or whatever option, our financial picture is still good, and neither option is more favorable than another.
No, I think
clearly, capacity-wise, there's difference, but as far as a financial position,
there is a difference between the options and sort of how much money flows through the capital and what's available and future options and flexibility. But from where we sit and discussing this with the rating agencies, having a plan, whichever plan it might be, is the most important thing. Not necessarily whether it's option 1 here or option 2. But having a plan of finance is what's most important when you're having those conversations. Whether it's, again, and I've talked a lot about the rating agencies, you can insert LGC into those discussions as well.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Steve.
What, for a town of our size, given where we are financially, I mean, are there any kinds of projections we can make of how much more debt we can take on before, in the middle of all of these bonds, realistically?
Absolutely. You know, you start to get a sense of that on page 18, where you look at, I'll take the upper right graph. You've got a policy that says you don't want to have debt to assessed value ratio above 2%. You're well below that. I don't think the town really has an issue with debt capacity. You could take on additional debt and still measure up pretty well. I think what you're going to get to first is debt affordability, is are resources that you will make available every year for debt service. And that's what the chart on the lower left is getting to, is how much of your annual budget is going to debt service. And that's probably where you're going to have your first real limiting factor, is what revenues are you willing to dedicate every year to debt service, and you'll hit some peak. But that's also the policy that you'll come to first. Debt service versus expenditures, not to exceed 15%. You're going to be pretty close with these bonds, and then it'll come back down. So from that policy perspective, this $20 million is about the max for the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Okay, can I ask you a technical question on the page 19? Your FY16, you have an adjusted surplus of $1.3 million. You see where I am?
Yes.
Next year, you have a adjusted surplus of $162,000, approximately.
Right.
Next year, we're running we have to use fund balance of $168,000. Am I reading that right?
Yes.
Okay. So at the end of, in 2038, do I add up column M and N? Or is it simply what's in N? For the
P, if you look at P is sort of a running total of M and N. So P starts with $105,000 of fund balance that you used in 16, or excuse me, in 15. Okay? Mm-hmm. P goes to 0. In 16, P picks up that $1.3 million. We add to it in 17, it comes to $1.4 million. We then deduct the 100 and some, we deduct the 58,000 or so. P comes down to $1,251,000, and then it starts growing again every year by column N.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So P is sort of a running total of what you might call a debt service fund or a capital fund that is getting added to or deducted by column M and N. I don't know if that answered your question specifically, but that's kind of how the math is working, or the columns work.
I guess I would actually have just a slight caution for the council as we look at different options on this, that what was sold to the public back in 2012 was, I think, closer to option 2. And that is the bleeding off of existing debt, and it was going to be replaced with the new debt. And I think if you look at the way it was mapped out, 2 cents in 14, 2 cents in 16, does a pretty good job. It covers it. There's a little extra there. We're actually charging more with those 4 cents than we need, than the bond is costing us. So and that's what was really sold to the public, that concept. Anything else would be, I think, have to be a new conversation, a new direction, and quite different than what we told the public we would do when we did these bonds.
Yeah, and you can see under option 2 there, page 20, that it's, as you've noted, it's column P is there's a fewer dollars flowing through there. We actually bring it down nearly to 0, which tells you that the 2 pennies plus the 2 pennies is right at
and especially with the lower interest rate, we're going to be, we erred on the side of collecting more than we needed, in simple terms. But I think the concept of, as we paid down the debt, it would then be replaced with the new debt was kind of the overriding concept that we sold to the public. And we'll visit this again, I'm sure, during the budget discussion, but I just wanted to caution that A is something, option one is a new thought. Option two is what the public was sold.
Well, we did look at option one. We looked at these options before.
We might
did
have looked
look
at them,
both.
but that's not what was sold to the public was. It's going to be a 4-cent tax increase, which actually doesn't cover it. It's because things bleed off, and that's what was presented to the public.
I think, yeah, but even if you look at option two, the total of 4 cents still doesn't cover it for the first couple of years.
Well, I know, but that was always known.
Oh, no, you're right. That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. And I think, credit to the, John Whitson and team that did this back in the day. That's really good news. That with the 4 cents that we programmed, that we're able to cover all the debt and have a little bit of a surplus, and it'll probably be even better than that with the low rate. So that's real positive news. That's really good. I'd hate to be up here with Ted giving us, hey guys, it should have been a dime or something. Yeah. You kind of blew it. So, congratulations to the former town manager and Jeannie. I know that you were heavily involved in that, and Julia. This is remarkable that we were able to. It's working out kind of as advertised. So, and we obviously we'll get into this more on what our other options are, but.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Mayor. I would follow that. That's how I felt too.
I just don't want to lose sight of what was presented back in the day. So, well, Mr. Cole, thank you very much, and I appreciate. If there are no further questions, we'll let you go and go fight the weather a little bit. But thank you so much for presenting this. This is great information, very timely, and you presented it in a very understandable way, so we do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Take care.
Okay, next up we have, for the good of the order, manager and staff comments. I think we have at least one.
Good evening. I just want to make a quick announcement at the next meeting, March 10th. There, I believe, is a special use permit on your agenda, and just remind you that is a quasi-judicial hearing. The other unusual thing is that this will track the regular 4-meeting cycle. However, we're going to be doing the evidentiary hearing, or analogous to a public hearing, on the first meeting on the 10th, because Courtney, who will be handling this, will be out of the office and not able to be there for the regularly scheduled business meeting in March. So we'll just do that and just give you a heads up.
So does that mean we're going to do it in 3 sessions, or we'll take 5 with skipping one? Or?
I believe it. I think it's scheduled for the initial March 10th hearing, and then that would be the second meeting in April, I believe. So I believe it's going to be just the 4-meeting. I don't have the briefing sheet in front of me.
That's okay.
Courtney sent to town council an email on the 17th. If you need us to send it out so you can brush back up, it gives you all the information, the facts, the timeline for this item.
Okay. Could I just, Frank, could you spend a minute to describe the process? Because I think we have a couple of council members this will be a brand new experience for them. If you could kind of give us a
trying not to, but
no,
I'm kidding.
I think it's worth just to get them thinking, because it is quite different from what we normally do.
Courtney, in the email that town manager referred to, Courtney has a little 1-page cheat sheet, for lack of a better term. It is a quasi-judicial hearing, and that means it's sort of like a judicial hearing. The presentations to you are sworn testimony. Each witness swears to what they're going to tell you is the truth to the best of their knowledge and belief. And the applicant is required to bring forward evidence to support and demonstrate each of the 6 elements that you'll have a full briefing on what the elements are to grant a special use permit. The applicant is supposed to bring forward evidence to support each of those. This has been through the planning board, so you'll have a planning board recommendation, you'll have a staff analysis and testimony, and then the applicant surely will testify. So you should have ample information. On this particular one, I believe the previous council has approved it, but it expired due to whatever economic terms, whatever their issues were, it just expired, so they're bringing it back for another run through. And it was filed back before the UDO became effective, so we're under the previous rules. As council members, you're required to not form an opinion prior to coming to the hearing. You're supposed to be like a jury and just hear the evidence and make your decision based on what you hear testified to you, and not. This is a hotel application, I believe. So, if your next door neighbor doesn't like hotels, that doesn't really make any difference. You just listen to what's presented here and does it support the.
And did you also recommend that we don't? This is not talked about except for at the hearings
The
themselves.
applicant is advised not to contact you, and if you do, you should refuse to, hear any information outside of. Everybody hears the same information in the same forum. There's no lobbying you like you might get in a rezoning or something where the property owner might want to tell you how wonderful their project is. Everything takes place here.
Okay. Thank you.
And we don't talk to each other either.
Not except in the public forum, of course you can.
Not in
Right.
private. No emails about it. No calls. No nothing.
But we also consider the planning and zoning recommendation, and the staff will give us input.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Martha, anything else from the staff? Okay. Good. Well, I know we're trying to get out of here at a decent hour to kind of beat the traffic. Not the traffic, but the weather. There is no traffic. The snow plows.
We're the only people on the road.
Yeah. Chris, do you want to start if you have anything for us?
Believe it or not, I don't
Okay.
have anything tonight.
All right. Good. You get extra credit tonight.
All right.
Steve?
I
You make up for that?
Well, I'm only going to do two things.
Okay.
I picked them selectively now. I just want to thank Public Works for doing a great job last week, and I know they're going to do a great job on Thursday too. And I want to thank Vicki for attending Open Data Day with me. We learned a lot, and I look forward to talking to Martha and the team on sort of the network assessment and how we continue to look at that. And I just am also curious as to, there's recently an article in the paper about Cary and accelerating Google Fiber, and so I'd just be curious. We don't have to talk about it today, but I'd just be curious if we know what our options are there.
Yeah, we're going to put a pretty comprehensive update in next week's news and notes for you
Okay.
on Google.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Liz?
I will pass tonight too, so we
Okay.
can speed along.
There you
here.
go.
I'm looking for extra credit, so I'm impressed.
You got it? Okay. Good. Vicki?
I'm good. Everyone be safe this week.
I just had one thing I like the new minutes that were the way we're doing it, and I like the one time we put in, anytime you can put in like a graph or something, kind of get the gist of what we did. I think one of the earlier ones, that's all. It speaks volumes, I think, something like that. That was it.
Yeah, I just have one item we do need to talk about for a couple minutes, and that is the Sister Cities program that we've met with some folks about, and the urgency of talking about it is, at this point, they just want to know: are we interested in pursuing this? It's kind of a letter of, yeah, we'd like to talk to you about it type of thing. There's no commitment. We were told that it would take several years to actually iron out all the details. Nothing happens overnight, and this is the reason they're picking Morrisville in particular, not only because of the Chinatown project, was because there's a current sort of a state-to-state, sister state program, and then there's a sister county program, and within that there's the equivalent of the county in China has already, one of those towns already has an agreement with Durham, for instance. So we would be another town with a sister city program with another town in China. Sort of, it's a much bigger one. Let me tell you that. I think you're talking about 1 million people in this particular city. But what we told the folks were that we would try to get back to them with at least the temperature of the council if that's something we want to pursue. There's absolutely no obligation. It's simply saying, yeah, we're interested in finding out more about it, because there's a lot more to find out about it. Their mayor is going to be here in, I think, the late March, April timeframe, and they would like to have our decision in order to make that visit more meaningful. If we were to say, yes, we're interested, then that's obviously something we could meet and talk about. So with that said, I know there's probably a ton of questions, but I needed to get back to the group on our general, view of it. Is this something we want to do or not do?
I'd be in favor of exploring that possibility.
Okay.
It'd be
Yeah.
neat and positive.
And we have a contact with the North Carolina State Sister City program that we should probably have a short conversation about so that we understand the process as well as potential costs.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to do with the structure to it, who would actually run it, or
Right.
there's
Process
a
is a
lot
big part of
to it.
this,
So
Also, like City of Raleigh, I mean, they've had some experience with this, I think, talking with other municipalities, because I'd like to get a little bit more of an objective analysis of the types of regions from China. I mean, I want to work with this group, but I want to hear from others on costs and benefits.
I think what a lot of towns do is there's a group that establishes a nonprofit then that helps with this sister city organization. So I am in favor too of pursuing and seeing what the options are and how feasible it is. So
Okay.
yes.
Chris? Okay. And I think there's I'll try to get a template on what this letter of intent is and what it looks like. There's one that Durham signed up for, so we have a neighbor that's close by, and I will certainly reach out to them with any questions. But I'll get that to everyone before we go to the next step. But I think it'd be a lot of fun actually if we had the mayor from, I'm trying to think of the name, XIANG.
Or something.
Yeah. So, okay, well, thank you very much for that. And
It also, one last thing, I think it'd also be neat, pursuing this, but also with a large Indian community, like an Indian Sister Cities program with an Indian city. So that could be something that we look at. But like Liz said, I think it takes getting groups together that can manage it, and nonprofits.
Yeah, because there's a lot of work, and I don't think it's anything that as a council could tackle on its own. We need some assistance with that. So
Rotaries do it. Rotaries do it a lot of times.
yeah, Rotary
International.
chambers or nonprofits, as Liz said. So okay, let's go ahead and see if there's anyone here for any other comments. By the way, okay. Anyone here? Okay, so public address, there's no one here. Let's go ahead and do the public hearing. This is number 9, public hearings. The item is 2015-009. This is the Wake Tech annexation between Watkins Road and Paramount Parkway. Tim, do you have any additional update for
No,
us?
this is a pretty routine item. We handle a number of these. This is the third of the four-step process, where the determination of sufficiency, establishing a public hearing, holding a public hearing, and finally a vote. And of course, this is the public hearing this evening, voluntary annexation.
Okay. Frank, we need to open the public hearing. Okay, so I need a motion to open, or
You can just declare it open, I think.
it's open. Anyone signed up for that? Martha? No? Okay. Need a motion to close?
I'll make a motion to close that public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and second to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Then we have, if I'm reading this right, action on March 24th. Martha, is that right? Okay. All right. Is there any, that's a month from now, is there any additional information we're going to get? Is the applicant wanting to do it any faster than that, or?
I didn't get a chance to talk with Rodney before he left for the day. I'll check in with him, but I don't believe so.
Okay. So if you check in with them and they want to do it sooner just to kind of move it on, is the council okay with considering it next time around?
on the 10th. I don't think that'd be a problem.
Okay.
Fine.
Christie, Wilson? Okay. I just saw the gap there. I don't know that there's any benefit in waiting a month, but, okay. A couple action items. We'll try to keep on moving along. We'll take a break here before definitely before the work session. 3 action items tonight. 2015-013. This is consider resolution to update the meeting audio record retention series. Martha, you have a 2-minute update?
Yes, sir. At the request of council last time, we checked with our provider of the audio streaming services and did confirm that it is outlined in our contract that we own the videos. If we would leave the service, we would be able to retrieve our videos, or excuse me, our audios, and do whatever we wish to do with them. We also did provide you with just a sampling of the other retention periods that some of our peer cities are using, and we could do whatever we want. The records retention rule is you can destroy after your minutes are filed. That's what we're actually asking you to waive, and then you could set any period or leave it indefinite at this time.
Any opinions on that?
Well, the way the resolution is written tonight, we're kind of indefinite, right? Okay. I'm okay with doing that, but I think at some point we should come back and revisit this. Clearly we're only starting from January, so we only have a handful of recordings right now. But I think at some point you need to come back and revisit it. I'm not sure you want to keep them for 5-10 years. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Any other thoughts?
I think technology will change, as we are aware. Carrie has an asterisk, so it's a 2-year retention rate, so they would have it rolling. And then some others have it. From the briefing, I wasn't really sure if that meant that they were doing indefinitely, but this was when they started, or...
Yeah, my assumption is they have just been adding to whatever they had when they started audio recording or something. They just have not destroyed. It's just there.
Okay. Because the capability may have been added at that point in time. I mean, I would, at this time, indefinite is acceptable, but I would consider 5-year retention rate to be reasonable.
Is there any
Process between cycles, you know.
I don't know. My first thought was that Resolution 2013-018 which is based on the state archives record retention policy, that's what we would now fall back to, but I don't know what that is. But I haven't studied, Liz, your point. That's a good point.
Yeah, if I can clarify, the current rule in the record retention policy is you may destroy after your minutes are approved. But you also have the right to retain as long as you wish, as long as you establish what that is, and that could be indefinite. I might suggest not only will technology change, but if we would proceed to televised hearings, that might be a better time to readdress, because our capacity and savings issues may dramatically change at that point.
Good recommendation.
How far back will we go then, now that we're starting this? I mean, it's
January 2015.
We're starting now.
now, and then
There's no going back.
that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, with abbreviated minutes, I think for right now, keeping the audio indefinite is a good idea. Just looking back at a recent thing that we had inadequate records, it would have been great to have actual verbatim
I agree.
going past. So
You go back 30 years.
unless the cost gets really prohibitive, in which case we can address it.
Yeah.
I think
Would
you're
be my
right.
thought.
I mean, it's-
All right, so we're going to leave it alone then, sounds
Glad
like.
to.
And
Like,
Martha, if we start running out of room in the secret closet, let us know. Okay.
Let me.
Where's that going to the cloud anyway?
Would we be able to parse out those two different types of history? Could audio be kept indefinitely and video for a couple of years?
I believe you could make that
So
choice
that might
at the
be a
time.
way to sort of keep something forever in a cheap manner.
Probably come down to how much it costs to have it out there on the cloud or
Yeah.
or what have you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. If I could have a motion to adopt.
Move that we adopt Resolution 2015-013.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that carries. Next one up is 2015-016. Consider appointments to the advisory committee to fill available seats by resolution adoption and appointment process. Martha, you want to get us up to date on that?
The update for this item is we did provide as an attachment to you an update on the attendance history. We did that for all committees, just that you could see. I believe that that there is adherence to the attendance policy. We have one person on Parks and Rec that it reached 3. However, we knew at the time that you saw that before that he had some personal issues, and that problem is resolving itself. So we are not aware of anyone that has an issue. We also did contact the gentleman that was not eligible for appointment to a committee and thanked him for wanting to serve, but sort of directed him to a volunteer capacity rather than as a sitting advisory committee member. We have also received one additional inquiry about an advisory committee application since you received this information. However, he has stated some preferences for committees that we don't have capacity, so we're going to keep his interest on file for the year, which is our typical protocol. So we did not add his to this package. You have at your places a ballot for the one committee that you would have to select from the applicants, because we have more applicants than available seats. That's the Public Safety Advisory Committee. Should you choose to want to do affirmative votes on the other committees, we do have a ballot prepared for you, or you may do that by affirmation.
Okay. Why don't we take these one at a time then? If you could, Stephanie, if you could cue that up kind of at the top one. So the first one is the Community Appearance Committee. There are 7 open seats with 1 applicant. I guess, is there anyone have any comments on this one applicant?
I'm excited to see the interest. I applaud the applicant.
Okay. TJ?
I'm not sure how we're doing this, but I'm fine with this applicant.
Okay.
Are we going to appoint committee by committee? Is that what you're?
I'd like to go, there are not that many of them, but I would like to kind of just quickly go through them. So I guess a show of hands if we support the applicant for one of these open seats.
For this
Community Appearance Committee.
The community
How have we done this in the
Appearance
past?
Okay, so, and I'll read it out. It
Technically
7-0 to appoint Rika Shah. Next one. The Morrisville Environmental and Recycling Committee, we have 4 open seats and 3 applicants. Any comments before we vote? Okay.
Wish we had one more.
Yeah, wish we had one more.
Good point.
Okay. All those in favor of appointing those 3 to those 3 plus open seats, raise your hand. We have 7-0. Those 3 are appointed. Performance Measure Assessment Committee, we have 1 applicant, also serving on the PZB for 1 open seat. Any questions, comments? All those in favor of appointing Carlene Botha, raise your hand. 7-0 also. The Public Safety, let's finish that. We'll come back to this last one because this will take a written vote. The Rainstorm Committee, we have 4 open seats. We have an applicant, Satish Jaramella. All those in favor, any questions, first of all, comments? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. He's appointed at 7-0. Back to the Public Safety Advisory Committee. We have 4 open seats and 6 applicants. The note is that Teresa would resign from the MRF if she was appointed, so she would just still be at 2. And then we have Ashley, Joy, Lee, Ron, and Troy as other applicants. Any questions or comments?
Just
Chris, go ahead.
Just a comment. I believe we appointed Joy to the Senior Advisory Committee in November.
Correct.
and that it's just not reflected on the sheet, but
Okay.
for whatever that's worth.
Thank you for noting that.
Okay.
My only question, I just have one question. If on the Public Safety Committee, we have people that miss more than 2 meetings, would it be an option if there's people that we don't select tonight that, that they would be asked to be removed and then we could put them on that or another committee?
The attendance policies and protocols are now established, so if that would be achieved, we're working with the committees to thank them for their service and open up that seat, but the appointment would come back to you for consideration.
Okay.
All right, so you have a ballot in front of you. You need to move 4 of these forward, so it might take a few rounds, I guess. Do you have extra ballots if that's the case? So for this initial one, if we go ahead and let's select 4. I hate to do 5 and then have all 5 win, so just do 4 for this one. Is there a more preferred method you have from that, Martha? Or
I think that'll work.
okay, all right. Vote away, and then we'll put them up here and.
I'll come around.
I made a mistake on that, and then you see me.
Can't you catch?
Martha, you want to have Tim, can Tim give his presentation while you're doing that, or are you just?
Sure.
Just to keep things moving. We'll come back to this item as soon as Martha's done. Tim, this next one is 2015-022, the approval of resolution requesting the local bill authorizing the town of Morrisville to require parkland dedication and our payment in lieu for multifamily residential development. And this is one of our legislative, it was the add-on to the legislative agenda. You have an update?
You just gave my...
Okay.
This is kind of a follow-up to the last meeting's adoption of the legislative agenda. This is the local bill. On your screen is the version that I've attached as attachment 3. I prepared this after conversation with staff person from the town of Cary, who through their legislative delegation meetings with our local folks had suggested piggybacking where possible. And I think the strategy was just to show that this is a bill that's already been adopted. The precedent's been set that the sky's not going to fall if this happens to a local act. I don't know if Frank or Chris have any other comments based upon their experience with the legislature, but we would recommend this. I do want to mention the mayor made a presentation to the local Wake County delegation just yesterday with the full legislative agenda, including this item. There was a question raised about kind of the mechanics of how this might be applied. I think it's not really to be addressed in this particular wording of this local bill. But if there's any other question, we'll be working that out when we get to the point of adopting and implementing it.
Okay. And is this, the wording here obviously is piggybacking on existing wording. When both the senators and representatives asked for this when it's, they were asking for it today actually. And I said, let us vote on it tonight. Let me get you a signed copy. I'll get it to them tomorrow. They're all supportive. Our 2 senators, 2 representatives that have some of Morrisville. They want to help us with this, so I'm confident it will go through. But should we not only give them a signed resolution, but this that's in front of us on the screen?
Sure. I think that'd be appropriate.
Okay.
Right? I'll make sure we get them tomorrow, first thing.
Okay, and then I'll sign whatever I need to tonight if the council approves that resolution. So, are there any questions on, to follow up on these, it was Representative Skip Stan that asked a question, more of a technical question. Tim has crafted a response, and I was going to take that and forward it on to Skip Stan and say, here's a response to your question. He's not one of the folks that would introduce or he wouldn't really be a part of putting this forward. So,
Just wanted to thank you for your presentation yesterday. You represented us well, and good job.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
The response, is that in question to how we'd implement it?
Basically, his question, without getting too much detail, but he asked if we would be basically assessing the units on a flat fee basis. I believe was the terminology he used. And
Think of it like a per unit fee.
Okay. I mean, just look at what Kerry does. I think.
Well, and that's what Tim's response was.
I spoke with Kerry, and they don't really draw a distinction. It's basically how the state law, they've adapted how the state law works for the subdivision and applied in the same way for multifamily, which is a flat fee or a per unit assessment.
Okay.
As opposed to an ad valorem type situation. So we're going to be in sync with what Kerry.
Okay, good. It seems fair the way they do it, and it's worked.
So Kerry already passed this?
You know, in 07 they had this, so they've had it for a while. And
Legislature
okay
passed
with
it
us
on
pretty much?
behalf of Kerry in 07.
yeah.
Okay. So this one, it doesn't overtake theirs.
And nothing,
Theirs,
actually,
that
it's
one still
nothing to do with
exists.
yeah.
And this just happens to reinforce because it has their name all over this.
Extend.
Yeah.
Expands the view from one jurisdiction to us as a second jurisdiction.
Okay.
Frank, any other comments?
No.
Okay.
Done.
All right.
It's a good.
So I think that's a good thing. I think that would be just another tool that we'll have for the future. Any other questions for Tim?
Thank you, Tim, for the work on this.
All right.
Thank you very much. You want a motion now for
Let's
this
go
one?
ahead. Let's go ahead and take care of this one, then we'll get back to the committees here in a second. So,
I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 2015-022.
Second.
who was first?
Me.
Ladies first. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that carries. And if you guys can get that to me tonight, I'll sign off on it and get it to them tomorrow. Thank you. All right, Martha, we're back to our vote here.
Ashley Meyer, mayor, received 7 votes. Lee Silverstein received 6 votes. Ron Smith received 5 votes. A tie for the 4th seat was between Teresa Listaglio and Troy Widstrand with 4 votes each. Joy Red Skinner received 2 votes, so I've passed out a second ballot. I'd ask you to select one of either Teresa Listaglio or Troy Widstrand.
Oh, can I make a comment about any candidate if I did? Mayor?
What's that?
Oh, can I say something about one of the candidates that I noticed? Or no?
I guess so, if it's appropriate. Are you advocating for them, or?
Somebody could probably assume that, so maybe I won't say it.
No, I was going to say something, so if you want to go first, I'm happy to go after you.
Oh, I noticed Mr. Winstrand lived and worked in Morrisville, and I don't know of too many people that have that perception or understanding or perspective.
Okay, fair enough. I'd say that Ms. Listaglio has shown a lot of dedication to the town. So that's just what I wanted to share from my perspective.
The campaign has started early.
Yeah, exactly. Understood.
Get your yard signs up soon.
It's good. It's all good, healthy.
That's a good thing. We're both advocating. So
Good
that's a
old
positive.
campaign.
They're all good people. I hope they all win.
They're all winners.
Yeah.
They're living in Morrisville.
After this, I'll let Martha do her thing. We'll do the consent agenda and then take a quick break before our What's the matter with
We got this resolution to vote on.
That's what we're doing.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. No, we're going to finish up the action items,
Okay.
and then we'll do the consent agenda, take a break, and then get into our talking trash. Okay?
Nice.
Ready?
Yeah.
Mr. Wickstrom received 4 votes.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, and thank you to all the applicants that applied. Does that cover that one?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any?
Well, we need to vote on the resolution.
Yeah. So go ahead and.
Well, do you want me to spell out everybody's name, or is that clear?
I think you can say as voted.
Okay, then make a motion to adopt Resolution 2015-016 with those applicants as stated tonight.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It's 7-0. Thank you very much. We do have a short consent agenda. Let's get through that. 2 items on it. 2015-015, approve a resolution awarding the audit contract for June 2015 through 17 to Cherry Beckert. And the second item is 2015-003 rather, approve ordinance for voluntary annexation located at 3025 Carrington Mill Boulevard. Any updates on those 2 items? Okay. Does anyone want to pull any of those off to talk about it separately? Okay. Need a motion and a second for the consent agenda?
I move that we pass the consent agenda.
Okay. Let's say those 2 resolution numbers for me.
A resolution, I wrote that we approve resolution 2015-15 and 2015-03.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The consent agenda carries 7-0. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back and talk trash.
I'm tired.
It was nice that you advocated.
All right. I want to welcome everyone back. It's now 8:26. We're going to begin our work session, where we're going to continue our discussion about solid waste. I'm going to let Tony reintroduce the item for a minute, and then it'll be up to us to talk about it.
Thank you, Mayor. At our last meeting, we talked about the primary question is, and policy decision is, how do we want to proceed with funding our solid waste program? Do we want to continue with the general fund funding model, or do we want to go to a different model? We talked over a couple of different options. The 2 options that really kind of stand out would be the tax rate model or the general fund model, and or a user fee of some type. When you're considering user fees, certainly one of the considerations you can give is to how much of that you want to recover. How much of the cost do you want to recover in the user fee? 100% cost, or do you want to phase it in over some period of time? Those are all options that can be decided upon, once we know what the total costs are and everything. What we're looking for is direction on really that basic question is, do we want to continue funding it as we currently do, or do we want to change from that model? Changing from that model to a user fee would require having a billing option. I feel like that we have 3 billing options. 2 are probably more favorable than the third one. They will take some time to implement. I would say that the shortest time frame would be about 60, 70 days, right in there. Once you decide that you want to, whatever you want to do, we still have a lot of work to do with either one of those entities, either Wake County and or Cary, to provide the billing service. And a quick recap of that: if you select the user fee and you select the county option, that would be one annual bill. It would be with the tax bill. It's very inflexible in terms of anything that you want to do different in the billing aspect of it. For instance, there's no vacation period. If somebody goes out of the country for a 30-day period, it doesn't make any difference to the county. That it's going to go straight through. Using that model, though, does give us a very high collection ratio. Excuse me. The town's tax collection is approaching 99.5%. It's very high, so it's almost a guaranteed collection. If people don't pay their trash, then of course that puts their taxes in delinquency, and the county would start that process. A little lengthier process, We would have to adopt probably some interim guidelines or regulations for people who are not, who didn't pay their taxes. So there'd be some work on our end to do that. It'd be somewhat cumbersome. If you go to the carry model of billing, they're already billing our utility customers. They would simply tack on whatever fee that the town approved for solid waste. They would tack that right onto the utility bill. The first $15, the first amount paid would go towards the solid waste fee. So if you didn't pay all of the bill, then you'd be delinquent in your water bill, and ultimately Carrie would turn the water off. So that's kind of the hook to get folks to pay the solid waste bill. With Carrie, we do have some flexibility, like I told you, in terms of this vacation time that they allow their residents and so forth. And it's really about, it would be easy. Both of them could be implemented probably within that 60 or 70-day time frame. The fact that Carrie's already doing our billing for us in one other area certainly would make it a little easier from staff perspective if you decide to go that route. So.
And Tony, on the carry option, would we also have the flexibility of when it would be implemented? I mean, it sounds like that the property tax bill, there's a certain day in the summer where it's got to be on there. It's not going to make it.
That's correct. You can implement the fee with carry, right to give notice. There's much more flexibility there. If you elect to collect it beyond July, or to implement it beyond July 1st, of course, we, the town, have to have funds to pay the waste hauler.
Right. And just, I'm sorry, Vicki, I see your hand. Let me ask one. How and when do we pay our waste hauler? How is that a monthly bill, an annual bill? It's a monthly bill. Okay. All right. And I'm sure I've got some other questions about it. Go ahead. So, Tony, are you done? And you said there was a third billing option. Is that the third party?
Third party we would have to negotiate with the for us.
Okay.
To collect it or to bill. They would collect the bill. There would be a charge for that.
Okay.
Probably higher than the other two options.
All right. Vicki, can I indulge in one last question? And it just has to do with, I'm just trying to set the kind of the overall picture with some of these things. The other, on, let me see. I'm going to let you go. Okay. Go ahead, because you're going to probably ask what I'm about to ask. So you go ahead.
Tony, I think I may have misunderstood some of the sequencing of our discussion tonight, because I think the primary issue that we have before us is the impending end of our solid waste management contract, June 30th, 2015. And we should probably first consider the level of service that we want for Morrisville, understand whether we want to extend our current contract, renegotiate for an RFP, or decide if we want to partner with Carrie for solid waste services, kind of more about what we want for the program. And the second question would be how to fund what we want to provide as a Morrisville service. So I hear you with the fee and the policy, and that is a good discussion, but first I'd like to know what we want as a town. Do we want current level of service? Do we want something different? Is the current level of service really expensive? That kind of thing.
Right.
And I think we covered some of that last time.
And that's kind of what I was going to talk about. I think there are two, I'll say, very different discussions that we're talking about here. I think the contractual discussion is going to go on, regardless of. We're just talking about how are we going to get paid for this in order to pay waste management. The citizens aren't paying them direct. So, Tony, if you could address.
Yeah, it is two different things. That what's in the contract and how we pick up trash and that kind of stuff is not connected with how you're going to pay for the service. Okay, that's totally different. If this discussion was not even being had as far as leave it in the general fund or take it to a user fee, we would simply be going through the motions revising the contract, tweaking it in areas that we see that we needed to make improvements in. If there were major changes to that, we certainly would discuss that with with the council. But that's really a totally separate issue. We're working with Merck now on some ideas of how to do recycling differently. That has an impact on the cost of the contract, but not on how it's going to get paid for from that standpoint. So this is clearly just a policy discussion relative to how we intend to pay for the service that we're going to offer. And that's where it is. I don't know if that clears it.
It does. I just wanted to be very clear because the last time we had this discussion, we were kind of mixing up the two.
Sorry, my fault. Apologize.
I agree with that. Good.
You need to get that
No, I got
taken
it.
care of.
Sorry.
There goes the
Okay.
other system.
Sorry about that.
We got insurance on the audio
Yeah.
equipment.
Okay, good. We're underwater. Okay, so to Vicky's point, there are a couple other things we talked about, and maybe there's some things that we could, as a council, kind of agree to take off the plate, or maybe I think, and this will be the first time we really talked about it as a group, but I think there are a couple things that maybe we can have a decision on and move aside and kind of get to the meat of it, which I believe is more the how's it going to be paid for. But there was the option of either using either merging the trash utility. There was an option of, or is that the one and the same as letting another town take care of it totally?
Right.
And then I think there was another option in there, just totally a third party running it, and they would bill the end customer. So with those two in particular, are there any people that want to just keep talking about those two, and that's merging with, in other words, let Kerry do it, and or let a third party do it? And I guess my only question would be, if Kerry's half the price of what we're currently paying, I might entertain that one, but I don't know that answer. So, are there any of those that we can kind of take off the table?
I think we need to keep in mind that the level of service in Cary is different than Morrisville. It is slight, but it is significant in the sense the recycling is only picked up every 2 weeks versus 1, and we have a lot of communities in Morrisville that have smaller capacity carrying recycling containers that they would have a difficult time with some of the 2-week cycle times. But that's just a consideration.
I'd be happy to take them off. I don't look at them as viable at this point.
Outsourcing. You're taking that off
Outsourcing or
the table.
Cary?
Both of them.
Both of them. I would agree. I don't see the benefit to either. I would agree with that.
Me too.
Yeah, and I don't think there's enough time to do a proper RP with Kerry, and
No,
I think we.
If that were the direction, as I said at our last meeting, if you're going to change from our typical service, not service, but how we're doing it now, then we would need to entertain discussions with our waste hauler to extend the contract that we have now to give us time to put all that together.
Okay, all right.
Quick thought on the, and TJ mentioned this too, I don't want to steal his idea, but is now the time to talk about service? So for example, TJ mentioned when the leaves fall, if one option for service would be for us to put our leaves in the front and they suck it up with the vacuum, is now the time to mention that type of stuff, or is that another meeting?
Not really. That's
Okay.
that's not a service with our waste hauler. That would be a separately contracted service that we would have to look for.
Okay.
Oh, the waste hauler doesn't do that.
Right.
Somebody else does it.
They're in the solid waste business.
Okay.
And then that gets back to what Vicki was talking about, because Kerry does that and charges their people. But I don't need to go there, but
It's separate. It's not part of the solid waste program.
I would be interested, as long as we're talking about the contract, I would be in favor of looking at it at a shorter period than 5.
Shorter than 5?
Yeah. Because of allowing us some flexibility down the road to maybe change.
Change to what?
Whatever. another, I'd make a Waste Management does it. Waste Industries and Waste Management both do things, right?
Yes, but all I will say is that the cost of your contract is directly related to the number of years of the contract.
Yeah.
No, I agree, but couldn't we bid it out as asking them if we do it, okay, here's for 5, what if we did it for 3?
Well, we've done it for 3 in the past.
Oh,
And so
okay.
we know that there's a considerable difference between a 3-year and a 5-year contract. What we would be looking at is an option for a 5 and a 10-year contract.
Mm-hmm.
Because at 10 years, you get there's quite a bit of savings, potential savings. And the reason for that is that the waste haulers can then amortize their equipment over that whole period of time, and they give you that benefit. So we would look at a 5 and a 10-year option is what we would be recommending.
Okay, I'd rather go the other way, but that's me. But
You'll pay more. You'll pay more.
I understand, but at the same time, I think there are things with recycling that maybe you can change that. Could you change that in these 5 and 10-year contracts without having?
I think there's flexibility that we could entertain that would give us some flexibility in that. Maybe we're already looking at ways that we can increase recycling, the opportunity, and if we change to a different program, that really doesn't affect the waste hauler, as long as we're picking up trash in containers that they can drive up to and pick up. Then it's not really changing the essence of the business of what we're asking for.
Well, okay, I just want to make sure from a town perspective, that we're looking at that when we enter that contract, because from my experience, I think that's how companies, they make a change. Somebody wants to make a change, and they'll go back and say, okay, sure, we can do that, but it'll cost you this much. So in the long run, you're better off maybe having a shorter contract. Because again, the only thing I was looking at was, what is something as simple as you change the size of the recycling can, made it bigger, and then made the waste container smaller? Does that affect the contract?
Initially, and that is one of the options we're looking at. But I think we can build that flexibility into the contract with the waste hauler if we need to. There may be an initial charge to switch out a container, but we go from there.
Would it be that much trouble to look at 3 years too, since you're looking at 5 and 10?
Okay. If that's what the council would like us to do, we'd be glad to.
I think we have to rely on the staff a little bit for managing contracts and things like that, and I'm sure if there's some options there that would make a big difference, that you'll present them to us.
But ultimately, just so I'm clear, this whole discussion on the contract bid will come back to us again before it's let out, right?
Well, this is a service contract, and it's within the manager's purview to approve it.
We wouldn't see
It
this.
falls within that purview.
We wouldn't see it unless we told them we wanted to see it. But
So this is our opportunity to speak up, I guess, then.
We'll be glad to bring you back. As we're making changes to the contract, substantive changes, changing dumpster sizes and stuff like that, you don't need to be involved with.
Right.
There are some things that we're working with Merck on now, and we'll get a read back from that, and that will drive some decisions of how we're going, and we can certainly bring those back to the council.
Okay.
right, so I think.
Sorry. I was just going to say, why wouldn't it come back? It's over $1 million program. Why wouldn't we see it again to sign the contract?
It's a service contract. It doesn't fall under the regulations of a construction contract.
But we're going to get more than one bid for it, right?
We have the option to negotiate it or to bid it.
And so what are your plans to do then?
We're still talking with the manager.
We haven't made those decisions yet. We're waiting to hear your feedback before we proceed.
I wish we'd bid it to make it more competitive, something that big.
If we renew our contract with the current vendor, does that preclude the other options that we want to get the Merck opinion on with pay-as-you-throw and waste zero? They're not mutually exclusive, are they? Because you're still going to need to. We talked about pay-as-you-throw and the waste zero solution. Would that affect?
Council referred that to Merck.
Okay.
And so they're going to evaluate, I think, pay-as-you-throw programs.
But that won't happen in this process.
That won't be, okay, all right.
It'll become a separate.
But if, excuse me, if we decided to go down that road or decided, however, we could add that on as a potential service working with Waste Zero, because do they work with, like right now we have Waste Industries that does our
Yeah,
Right.
they're not exclusive to any particular waste hauler.
Okay,
Their
that's all I
program,
need to know.
they model their program to be able to fit with any waste hauler.
Okay.
All right, Dennis, I think what we heard is at least I'll call them the outsourcing options. Let's take those out of the discussion and just really concentrate on how the town will be reimbursed for the trash service. I don't want to put anyone in a position, but there were a lot of variations of people on different sides of this discussion. Would anyone like to start the discussion? Anyone have any strong feelings?
I started first, so I don't want to go first again.
And I would say one thing we didn't really, we talked about these deadlines and we have a little time, so tonight doesn't necessarily have, this is not an up or down vote necessarily, it's more let's just continue moving this forward and however we end up. And so we have a little time to make the final decision. Tony, you'll give us a deadline at some point.
Okay.
If we seem like we're talking about this too much for too many weeks, you can.
Hoping that by your meeting in March 10th, that we would have a pretty good idea of what direction to go, so that we could.
Right.
We still have
Okay.
discussion.
All right. So we have a couple sessions here to go. So, anyone like to start?
I could say that I am in favor of just continuing the present funding mechanism of using the general fund. I think it's a good way to, it's a system that's maybe not perfect, but not really broken at this time. And I think that now would be a bad time to voluntarily give up a revenue stream.
Okay.
Then I'd like to add, I mean, from my perspective, I don't look like we're running across what started in my mind, what started me thinking this way was we have a hole of $800,000 roughly that we have to fill. How are we going to make that whole? So you can raise taxes, you can cut back on services, look for efficiencies, which I think they do a very good job, or in some special cases, you can have a user fee. And this is one of those. So that would, I think, could make us whole. And there's all kinds of things you can do from that, as we discussed 2 years ago with stormwater. So I look at it as doing what we're doing doesn't make us whole. We're going to lose $800,000. But
I'm curious, so this discussion predates the privilege license issue. That wasn't even a thought when maybe it was a little thought, but
right, but that was a good opportunity then to kind of bring this up. That's all I'm saying. From my perspective, and I'm not trying to go down more and more discussion, I'm just trying to tell you where I'm coming from. So I'm trying to get to whole again because I look at it as we're going to lose $800,000 of buying power. We heard a little from the bond referendum, or the bond securities people. We're losing. So if we continue the way we are, the answer could be we could raise taxes, which I don't think that's a good one. I don't think they're going to find enough efficiencies in programs that you could do that. So services will start to degrade. So that's why I was bringing up the option of looking at a user fee for something else, because you just can't slap a user fee on anything. You cannot make it for a profit, so we can't go out now and say, gee, we're going to charge people more for stormwater so we can use it for the general fund. No. So that's why I came from this, and then as I tried to explain before, that's why I looked at the recycling aspect of it, because I think once the public understands what they're paying for, that they'll start to say, well, if I recycle more, it would help the environment, and it could help our bill. It could help my individual bill. And that's been proven all over the country. So I'm just saying that's where I'm coming from. Those are my motives, and they still are. Okay.
Okay, so then I need to clarify, because we had a different conversation 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, we talked about not raising the 2-cent tax increase for the bond.
I didn't have that conversation.
Well, that's the conversation I heard 2 weeks ago, that we were. So let's clarify, because this is really important to me, because we've commingled three different things now. We're talking about our obligation and commitment to the 2012 bond. We have a privilege license, $800,000 in excess, $800,000 hole, and now we have a solid waste
User fee that we
user
could
fee or
use to
bill
help fill that hole.
no, I'm not going to call it user fee yet, but a solid waste bill that we're also addressing. 2 weeks ago, we talked about the fact that the user fee bill of $190 a year per resident would be in lieu of the 2-cent tax increase.
That's not what I heard.
No,
Okay, that's
that was not-
exactly what I heard 2 weeks ago.
I'm not looking at that at all.
That's how I heard it too. Was it would be used as an offset.
I'm only looking.
Well, I didn't.
At least that's how I understood
Right,
it.
but that's,
Mike, that's
Mike, it sounds
exactly
like
what
Mike's
the words
calling
were.
this
The
an
words
offset
were,
for the-
we don't need to increase taxes. We don't have to do the 2-cent tax increase for the bond, and we can instead have a fee.
What I was saying, and maybe it's semantics, but if we were at a place in the future, let's say it's July 1st, and I don't want to even guess what the budget cycle will bring, and I think that's why it's important to continue this discussion, because I think it is so intertwined with all these other decisions. So
Agreed.
just to get that out there. But let's say, for example, if we were to able to say our rate is still 39 cents, but with that now we are fully funding the 2012 bond obligation and making some headway into these other revenue pressures that we have. And you're going to get a user fee for your trash, by the way. You build whatever it is, if $5 a month, $15 a month, whatever it is. That is what I was promoting, or that was my vision. I'll call it that. Was that it was not. I think, and it's always been the fact that we have this 3 cent built into our tax rate for basically a utility. It's no different than telephones, cable, cell phone, water, sewer. It's a utility. I wanted to make that a user fee to relieve the pressure from having the general fund pay for this all the time. And I always saw, we knew this tax increase, I would say 2 cents of a future tax rate would be dedicated to the parks bond. I was always accepting of that. I knew that was going to happen. And it is semantics, because at the end of the day, all the stuff is going to get paid for somehow, some way. Whether it's user fees, a tax increase, a combination of the two, it's probably not going to happen just through sheer growth. So I think we can, just to be brutally honest about it, that there's pressures from a lot of different directions. So I guess going back to your initial thought, now that I've said that piece.
We made, back in 2012, we made a commitment to the public with the bond referendum. And that commitment was that we would immediately, that there was going to be a 4-cent tax increase. We immediately raised the 2 cents. And then, back up. Of course, the bonds passed unanimously. I mean, overwhelmingly passed. So the public was accepting of the fact that there would be a 4-cent tax increase, that the 2 cents would happen immediately, which we did, and the next 2 cents would happen this year in this FY16 budget. I want to fulfill that commitment to make sure that we are fully funding the bond referendum and all that goes with that. So that is my number one priority, by the way.
And that's exactly what I said. I would, if you were to pull out the solid waste cost, within that 39 cents, you could fully fund everything you ever needed for that 2012 bond, plus, and have room for other revenue pressures if that's
but
what
the
you
way
want
you're
to do.
advocating to fully fund that is to give the public a $190 fee every year.
No, that's to pay for their trash. It doesn't matter.
This is more than semantics, quite
Well,
frankly.
if you're saying, it's the same as raising it to 41 cents.
And I am okay with that. I am okay with that. The public is okay with that. The public told us in 2012, I am okay with you raising my taxes. They are fine with that. They did not buy, in 2012, they did not buy into a trash user fee in lieu of a total of 4 cent tax increase.
Of course they didn't. That wasn't part of the bond referendum.
That wasn't part of the commitment we made to the public either. I want to fulfill the commitment we made. My number one priority.
I've never, ever debated that, and I totally 100% agree that that's going to happen. That's really not part of this discussion. It's, do we remove $1 million out of our, from property tax and put it as a user fee? That's the discussion.
And so then my answer is no. If you are going to advocate when we go through budget conversations that we do not raise taxes 2 cents.
But if you reduce them, then you're basically raising taxes. I mean, and again,
you're right. A user fee is I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. But in your scenario, you're now doing a switch on the public. The public agreed to.
The public is not naive. They know that they're getting a fee.
I understand that, and that fee now is outside of their tax rate, which they did
Correct.
also did not. They did not buy into in 2012. In 2012, they were fine with the fact that their tax rate was going to go up and that would be on their tax bill. That would be a write-off. We talked about these issues 2 weeks ago, that your tax rate is something you write off then on your taxes too, your bills. So now you're advocating for a user fee, which they can't write off. And we talked about that 2 weeks ago too. So now we've got a whole different scenario than the scenario that was sold to the public in 2012. My initial priority is to fulfill the commitment that we made to the public in 2012.
And that's going to happen. That's really not, that's not part of this debate. It's how do we want to fund the trash? Is it part of the tax rate or is it a user fee?
But I think
I'm not debating the whether or not we're going to pay for the bond. Of course we are.
Well, I think we're mixing. I mean, can I go, please?
Sure.
I think we're mixing up the two issues. I was always under the impression that we're at 39 cents and that I supported the bond, with the voters approved this bond, so we're at 41 cents. I look at the looking at a fee as just sort of, I think TJ made some good points that the system isn't broken and that we want to look at what our programming needs are when we build ourselves into a tax rate. But at the same time, I think the citizens of Morrisville need to know that a fee, the benefit of a fee, regardless of whether we do it now in the future, long term, is that dollars that you would spend out of the general fund for waste could be used for other infrastructure and needs of the town. So if you basically look at where we are right now with increasing revenue pressures, that if it was $1 million a year or whatever it is, I'm not guaranteeing that we're going to be swapping tax rates or whatever, but I think the policy argument we have to make is, do we want to begin this discussion or keep the option open of having a fee for that very long-term reason of the value of $1 million over 5 years to fund CIP, transportation projects, those kinds of things. So that's the way I was looking at this, not mixing the two. I hope that helps. I think I'd be wanting to listen to what you all think about.
That's a different conversation. That's a different conversation, in my opinion.
And the reason we're having it now is because we knew this tax increase was coming up. There are additional things that have happened that we've noted since we started talking about this. I would just like to add that I think we have to be very careful about our tax rate, because that does drive how people invest in our town. There's really, I think that's just a basic thing. If you look at our growth in the future, we're investing $15 million in a bypass to open up 400 acres of primarily commercial property. And those people that are going into those 400 acres to develop are looking at return on their money and investment, and is Morrisville a better place to go? Is it, can we build here versus somewhere else? And one of the things, they look at a lot of things, but one of the things they'll look at is tax rate. And so I just want to be, I'm trying to think a lot further down the road maybe, and just think there'll be additional pressures on our tax rate. I just think we have to be very, very careful, and if there's an opportunity to help that, to help those investment dollars that will come down the road, we want them in there as quick as possible in that 400 acres. And I think if we have a tax rate that is close to our neighbors, that it makes, it's a different decision for people investing. So that's where I'm coming from a little bit, is I'm looking way down the road. What is our tax rate going to be? What can we do? We've got to, it's not business as usual anymore. We've got to look at ways to, we're going to have to look at ways to raise revenue. And to charge people for a service they get, I don't think is entirely inappropriate. And maybe it's a phasing thing. I'm not saying we have to do this overnight, but I think if people are open to the idea, that's a separate discussion. If you're completely shut off, you don't want to have any more discussion, then we can go there too.
Could I speak a little bit on? There's a philosophical, economic thing there that you mentioned, that the property tax rate is one of the main drivers of what attracts companies to an area.
I just say it's one of the factors.
One of the factors. I agree.
There's a lot of things.
When I went to the Chamber of Commerce, had a couple of things with like corporate headhunters that sort of solicit companies to come to the area, and the property tax rate wasn't in the top factors. It was like employment, location, good value, good management, good governance. I think those are the things that are more important, and providing good value services to our residents is, I think, our job, and I think that's the main thing that we can try to differentiate ourselves for, and I think that's more useful than really concentrating on the property tax rate, because the commercial entities and the retail, they also want to serve the residents. They're in the same job that we are. They want to provide good services, and in order to do that, they know that they have to spend money, they have to invest. So I think it's important that we make sure that we have enough money for good programming and not try to keep a low property tax rate, because that impedes our ability.
Actually, what I'm talking about would increase opportunity for more programming, not decrease it, would increase it.
If you're assuming that these companies will come in faster because...
No, I'm just talking about just from sheer numbers on your tax rate, that you would have more available money to do roads, to do CIP, to do all this stuff.
Only if we keep the current tax rate would we have more money available, I think.
Right.
Staying
If we
whole.
have the same tax
whole.
rate and the same asset base, a higher tax rate actually gets us more revenue, not less. So if the companies come in, irregardless of the tax rate,
You're missing a $1 million expense you forgot about.
What's that?
The trash.
Could I?
That's part of the tax rate. You can't just say, it disappeared. It's there. I mean, so I'm talking about it's no longer there. You pull it out, it ain't there anymore. So
It's being paid for by the residents either way. You're just calling it something different.
Right. And I've never debated that. I'm not. And think about who is it that pays for everything a business does?
Customer.
Right, the residents. Ultimately, the residents are paying.
They vote with their dollars.
Right.
I agree. So that's a great way for the business community to support the residents by providing a good service and being an attractive vendor for the residents. And that sort of, if you're successful, the cost of doing business is your property taxes, what used to be a privileged license fee, which now went away. So businesses like predictability. And there was a good equilibrium about contributions into the town coffers.
Do you think they like the stormwater fee?
No one does.
Okay.
The residents don't like it. No one likes it, but it needs to happen, and that's a federal mandate. So I understand where you're going with that.
That's debatable. It's not a federal mandate for us to do the stormwater fee.
I'm sorry. Well, That may be true. And we implemented it, I thought, because we had to.
But 4
There
years
are
ago,
have any
state
further
regulations,
development
there are state
in the town.
regulations that we need to adhere to, and the stormwater fee allows us to adhere and
Well,
abide by the state
do a lot
regulations, so
of
we're not
things.
fined and feed.
but 4 years ago, we were actually considering funding it out of the general fund. And it's amazing how well it's worked by setting up this fee and how the program has grown. And imagine now if we had to pay that money out of the general fund, right? So, I mean, that's just the point I'm trying to make. Yeah, but it's not.
A little off track, but I
That's
still
okay,
feel a lot.
that's
I
okay.
want other people to.
I'm not sure if I can add a lot of new items, but what I've heard is that the citizens have spoken overwhelmingly. We saw it in the Davenport presentation. We have almost 80% support for the road bond and 73% for the park bond. So the promise is that we would raise taxes in order to implement those things. So we absolutely have to implement. We have to, make those bonds happen, and then we have to make those projects happen. Now with the trash, if we have a 3-year contract or a 5-year contract or 10-year contract, we're still over time going to have increasing costs for solid waste collection. So more and more of the general fund would be used ultimately if we kept all the same tax rates. I believe that would be true. Is that correct, Tony?
Yes, I mean, there will be CPI increases, just, that would take up more each year. You'll have grocery customers, of course, you get taxes for that. But you would have a CPI cost that would have to be adjusted periodically to account for that.
But we don't get a CPI for our taxes, do we? I mean, that has to be.
Well, you do, revalue, I mean.
Yeah,
Right, but, right,
Housing.
which is where I'm going.
If you don't go revenue neutral.
I'm just saying every year people
Right.
buy and sell houses, regardless of the,
So
8-year
with that
cycle.
CPI, if you will, in 2016, we're going to have the properties reevaluated within our town as well as all of Wake County. And at that point, we can look at a lot of different policy options. We can look at a fee schedule versus the general fund, because we will have a better understanding in the next 7 years of how we're going to have revenue streams. So I'm more willing to maybe stay where we are for a year, get more information from the 2016 property reassessment so that we understand more long-term about where our resources are and what's the best way to fund waste collection, so that as those incremental increases happen, we make sure that we're still providing the same level of service that we want and meeting the obligations by the voters. So that's where I am right now.
But we can assume, one question I have is that regardless of what decision we make, we know that we're going to see the cost increases for the solid waste program over the next few years. It'll continue to grow.
it has nothing to do with this conversation.
No, it does have something to do with this conversation.
Well, they're happening regardless of how it's paid.
No, because people are being told out there that, if we don't do this, if we don't look at a fee, I don't want people to think that the consideration of a fee, the intent was to just slap a cost on the citizens, because they're going to pay more either through a tax increase if we continue with just funding out the general fund, which we may do. But it is true that there will be an increase in our solid waste over the next 5 years, correct?
There has been an increase in our solid waste over the past 5 years. That will always, you'll always have that. It's not as recognizable to the citizens because you absorb it currently in your general fund.
But we'll be spending more and more money on solid waste, and I'm not saying that I'm not in favor of that. I'm just saying that as those costs goes up, more of the general fund dollars would go to solid waste, and that would be less dollars that could go to other things.
Unless you incrementally increase the general fund revenue.
Which would, okay.
Which could be done at reevaluation time, it could be done any time. I really think that, and I don't want to, y'all are having some great discussion, which I really am glad to see.
Entertaining?
No, seriously. But perhaps you go back to the kind of a basic thing, and why are we even talking about a fee? What's prompted the fee? What's prompting this discussion? Councilmember Schenck, I think, was correct. You have a gap facing you, and part of staff's job, manager's job is to figure out how to fill the gap. Certainly if you transfer the cost from the general fund to the user, then you do free up funding in the general fund that can be used towards filling the gap. Now you have this issue of paying for the bond. And so if you transfer the cost of solid waste to the users, and you have this amount of money left in the general fund, you fill up your gap, if that's the way you choose to do it. But now we also have to fund the bonds. So how are we going to, and as many of you said, the voters have indicated that they understand there's going to be an increase to do the bonds. And the other thing, and I don't want to throw another rock in the water here, but
Go ahead.
you still have to have, you don't have to, but you're still looking for money for projects, for CIP projects and things like that. So it is a balancing game, and how you try to look at that. But maybe if you kind of go back to what your real thoughts are here of why you would even entertain a fee.
I have a question.
It might help you get to a decision.
So from the presentation tonight by Davenport, if I understood either option 1 or 2, if we were to pursue that, we would have over $1 million surplus in 16 just from the issuance of the 2-cent increase.
A surplus that is unidentified, and I'll agree with what Tony has indicated. That presentation is related to those scenarios. It doesn't take into account all of the other things that impact your comprehensive budget decision, all the things you want to program, impacts on your other revenue sources up or down. That's where you take into account. We do know we have that $800,000 gap. They've illustrated as a potential capital reserve, but really the way we budget now and why you saw an option 2 is that folds into operating monies that you can deploy in one of many ways. And you do not have all of the information to be making decisions on either a tax rate or how much a user fee would be at this point. You don't have that information. How you handle this fee changes that slate of options that we as staff are able to bring forward in a comprehensive budget discussion.
And that's all I'm trying to do is leave it on the table as an option, because if we get to the end of the budget and we're talking about a tax rate and we're trying to plug an $800,000 hole and you say, I want to raise taxes, you can tell, you know how I feel about that. So I'm asking for an option so we still have one to do what's best for the citizens, what's best for the government. We're going to jeopardize that bond rating if we don't fill this $800,000 hole, or jeopardize being able to float that bond at that time, is how I kind of look at it. So that's all I've asked for when I'm bringing this up, is to have an option and maintain that option for staff and for us.
So, I've talked to Michael today, and actually I think I've talked to all of you, and I think at some point we should impose a solid waste fee. I'm not opposed to that, and I would probably want to phase it in over time. So I'm with Michael on that. I think by putting it in the same discussion as the loss from the privilege license revenue, to me, that's where I get a little uneasy, because there is a gap. It's specifically identified as revenue that we're not receiving from business, and now we're requiring only residents to bear that burden, and that's how I look at it. But there are so many different ways you can look at tax policy. We could be here for the next 5 weeks. There's just no good way to do it. But for me, it's a timing issue. I would feel better doing it not this year under that constraint for me. But I think, we're running out of revenue sources here, from the legislature. So I think this is something that we need to consider, but I don't think it's fair, in my opinion, to just make the residents bear the loss of that revenue. That's just my opinion.
And I'll just add, I always like to have options and available tools and different things. And I agree with Martha that I think there's a lot more going on that makes it very difficult to say yes or no to this. I just think there's too many things that we're going to discuss over the next couple of months that we may want to have this as an option. So I would hope that we could maybe continue this discussion, gather our thoughts a little bit more about what this means, whether it's, and we can decide in March whether it's, is it off the table forever? Is it something we want to bring up next year? Is it, what are the options? So we got a lot of good news today with Davenport. I mean, this is, this town is in good shape, but I'm always thinking way down the road, and particularly those 400 acres we're about to break open, and I'd love to see that as a place people would just, there's no excuse for them not to invest in Morrisville, and that's what I see. Then you would have, when you tip that balance, you get that much more commercial property paying in your tax base, and that does help the residents. That helps them quite a bit. And it used to be like that, I think, back in the 80s or so, where you had a much higher commercial rate here than as far as percentage of people paying taxes.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. Do you think a 41-cent tax rate is going to deter business from coming here to the town of Morrisville?
I don't know. I think it depends on how everyone else looks at the same time. To be honest with you, I don't know. It's an extremely valid question, but I don't know if what's the breaking point? I don't know.
Because I don't, and I'll tell you, and I feel confident saying that because when we had the vote in 2012 for the bond, the Morrisville Chamber of Commerce funded a campaign to get folks to vote yes for the commitment that we were making at the time for a 2-cent tax increase right away and then a 2-cent tax increase in 2016. Yeah. So that gives me the confidence that the chamber is not afraid of a 41-cent tax rate. Would they love a lower tax rate? Would I love a lower tax? Sure, but it all comes down to it, and you're right, it all comes down to what services you want to provide the community. The 2012 bond was an investment in this community, and overwhelmingly the public was okay with that, and I want to fulfill that commitment, and I think I'm not so 41 cents does not concern me greatly.
I think that the biggest difference is the world has changed dramatically since 2012. I mean, and it's, you could say stormwater, privilege, sales tax, all these things have happened since then. They weren't even in discussion back then. So I think the world has changed, and what maybe 41 cents is acceptable to everyone. But I don't think that's, is that where it's going to stop? I don't know. What other pressures are we going to have? So I'm just looking for.
I'm not advocating for anything higher.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that.
And the public.
But I'm just saying, there's the, I think I respect 2012, what happened. I'm totally on board in funding it. I'm just trying to come up with a method of doing that within our existing tax rate by having a user fee. And, if it stopped at 41 and you could tell me, Mark, it will never go above that, I'd probably be pretty happy. But I just think there's just too many things that are going to put pressure on us. And, we can hope growth pays for a lot of that stuff, and it probably will for a couple more years, but eventually, there's just There's going to be more and more pressure. I just see it as an option.
If what you're suggesting bought us capacity, I could see that. I don't see that. It doesn't buy capacity, Mark. You're actually switching. You're just saying instead of a 2-cent tax increase, we're going to bill the public, and it's like a swap. I don't see any added capacity in that scenario.
There's no extra revenue.
Absolutely.
There's no extra revenue.
No, there absolutely is. If you go from, it's theoretical here for a second. You're at 39 cents, you strip off $1 million, you're at 36. You add the 2 cents, you're at 38. I'm saying stay at 39. That's an extra penny right there.
That's false logic.
It doesn't fill the privilege license hole either.
It's a lot better than just 41 cents.
Hold on, I'm confused. So
Why are we talking about the? I want to just go back to like.
I mean,
I think I'm gonna. I don't. I'm sorry. What I want is just to, as we move forward, to know from from Martha and the staff, or how are we going to bridge this gap? I want to see options on the table so that we can make a better decision of what we're going to do. But I'm open to looking at a fee. I mean,
Steve, let me just finish this thought, because this is an important thing.
I'm sorry.
It's actually increasing revenue to help pay for whatever gap there is. And I just proved it. It increases it by 1 penny or $380,000. That's what it does. It gives us extra money that we wouldn't have.
And if I can say, you're right. It's a lot of a shell game, and that's all it is, and that's fine. And it goes back to my point about timing. When you put it in that context, you're not making all property owners absorb the cost of the bond. If you levy only the trash collection fee to do that, then you're asking only residents to tell me how that doesn't make sense, because hang on. So what you're saying is we're going to not levy the 2-cent tax.
No.
So we're going to go to 41, and then we're going to levy the trash fee too. Is that what you're saying?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, so what are we going to do then? We're not going to go to 41. We're going to stay at 39.
But now it includes 2 cents for the bond. The bond is fully funded.
And where does that 2 cents come from? Trash fee?
Because you went from 36 cents to 38 cents.
No. Right now our ad valorem rate is 39 cents today.
Let's take off that $1 million. You're at 36 then, okay?
Okay. Where does so we're lowering the tax rate to 36 cents now?
I'm just saying in the theory is you would lower the tax rate to 36 cents.
Okay.
There would be a user fee.
Okay.
The net payment for Morrisville residents would include now a user fee, but they'd have 3 cents less on their tax rate.
Okay.
Okay? We would raise your taxes 2 cents because of the bond. So that puts it back up to 38 cents. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm even willing to say, well, let's just keep it at 39 cents, which is an extra penny above that. So you would not only pay for the bond,
right,
you'd have an extra penny.
Okay.
And your residents would have a user fee for the trash.
And that's my point. When you pay for the bond, you're doing that only by making residents pay for the bond.
Otherwise, you'd keep it at 36 cents, if that was the case.
Okay, so you go back to 38, so there is some capture there from
you're
all
capturing an
users.
extra penny that you don't have if you just go to 41 cents.
So you're saying that we have more revenue when we lower our tax rate?
Sure you would.
It's the most absurd thing I've ever heard.
Did you hear stormwater?
Stop talking about stormwater.
I'm just saying, it's really not absurd at all. Those are the mechanics of what would happen if you remove. Let's say we didn't have the bond, any other pressures, and we just removed the $1 million, and we would lower the tax rate 3 cents, and now the residents would be paying that $1 million through user fees. Exact same money, just paid for it through a different
We say
mechanism.
we remove the $1 million. What does that
Take it
mean?
out of the general
It
fund.
takes it out of the general fund.
Okay.
It would no longer be,
Funded through the general
Yeah.
fund.
Okay.
so you'd be at 36 cents. Okay?
Right.
Oh, we have to raise it 2 cents because of the bond, so that puts it up to 38 cents. And I was saying if you go up to 39, you actually can cover some of your gap. So you've kept your tax rate the same. You've moved it to a user fee. I'm not saying anyone's paying any less. I'm just saying that the tax rate now is at 39 cents.
But it's the method in which people are paying then. We have changed the method. We have changed the intent. And that was never the commitment in
What do you mean?
2012.
I don't understand that. What do you mean you changed
In
the intent?
2012, the public was.
We're not allowed to lower our tax rate because we moved
But
something
you're
off
not
of it?
lowering the tax rate,
Sure,
Mark, and you're not buying any
I just did.
capacity
I
in the
just told you.
budget.
How do you lower it to 36 cents?
But you're not filling any gap. You're not.
I just filled it up 380,000. That's not there with the 41 cents.
Could I just kind of recap? What I think the mayor is proposing is a revenue-neutral solution with 100% recovery on the solid waste collection to the residents, and with the void where the general fund was originally paying for solid waste, that could be filled with the 2 cent bond fulfillment, and then there would be another cent which possibly could fill other gaps or be used for capital improvements. That's what I think I'm hearing you say.
Pretty much.
What I look at possible fees as doing is offsetting capacity needs. So a fee would mean that we can't fulfill our service levels with our current capacity and our current model, that we would use a fee that we were authorized to do for some percentage of cost recovery so that we could have future growth, future amenities, future projects, future capital improvement projects that we would need. Looking at the model that Davenport presented tonight, I think we wouldn't be able to meet future needs with the same level of tax base. It seems like we're not building in future capacity. Costs are going to go up, and a fee, when it's needed sometime in the future, could help us with that capacity pressure.
I look at the fee as a tool that could, like Chris Gardner said, enable us, or I think you said you were in favor of looking at it because it could help us build that capacity. I don't think it's necessarily tied to the tax rate. Now, it would. I was always looking at 39 plus 241, and then even if we were exploring a fee, what we would do with the tax rate might be maybe we wouldn't go down the whole 3 or whatever. But I think that I'd rather get more information, but I don't want to rule it out. I think the reason is from a policy perspective, do we want to look at it for that reason of building out that future capacity?
So I think we need to probably continue this discussion.
That's good. So it's about 9:30.
Yeah.
Are folks okay with continuing discussion, or is there a majority that's sick and tired of it and wants to move on?
Well, I'm there, but I still do want to wrap my head around what you're saying, Mark, because the math doesn't. I'm still not getting it, but maybe we should just talk later.
Yeah.
I'm going to suggest that I've heard enough, and I'm expecting Tony's heard enough.
Okay.
Tell us what you really
tell us how you
think.
I think Tony's heard enough that I think that I think my best recommendation is I think we've gotten enough information from you that we can model some stuff once we're also able to provide some really maybe concrete information about needs. What I heard from this council at the retreat was you want to get things accomplished, get things done. I don't think any of you are going to argue that that is going to take money to do in some form or fashion. So perhaps once we're able to start looking at a slate of things you want to accomplish and what it's going to take to do that, which is going to come to you through the budget process, perhaps that's the time to introduce some of these models and see how it looks. Maybe that'll frame the conversation for you better.
I like that.
All right. All right.
Seems pretty simple.
Thanks. I won't ask for final comments, so let's move on. We have some announcements. Next meeting will be March 10th, briefing session. March 24th is a business session. Also, next Tuesday night, a week from tonight, will be the discussion or conversation with about RDU and Lake Crabtree. So I hope everyone can make that. It's from 6 to 8 p.m. right here. We have a couple special meetings coming up. The following Thursday, the CIP workshop on the 5th, May 19th budget work session, June 4th budget work session also. As we get closer to the summer months here, make sure you're communicating about vacation and time off, and it's not unusual to have to occasionally miss a meeting, particularly in the summer. So just let us all know, and if we can work around major votes and stuff, we'll try to do that. So, any final thoughts before we adjourn?
Thought we had a very good discussion tonight.
I did too.
All right. Need a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is now 9:29. Thank you.
I'm worried about that.